Radio Okitalk, Radio Okitalk, von Mensch zu Mensch.
Welcome to Team Rabbit Hole edition 130, 40 that is, Quantum Phinix with Alisha Young Hall, operating out of Costa Rica. Join the team as we go down the rabbit hole with a Scorpio who's using astrology, human design, gene keys, and other cutting-edge spiritual techniques to aid in programming ourselves with internally chosen parameters for the good of all. Welcome.
Wow, beautiful intro. Thank you so much.
I definitely just wrote it, so I'm glad you liked it. I was like cramming like a kid on the back of the bus of school, like, I got a pop quiz and I don't know this stuff. I didn't get much sleep last night, a couple hours, so I've been kind of scattered-brained today. But thank you, Alisha, for coming on. Basically, we're going to kind of go through the regular rigmarole here. The 140th episode, which is crazy because, I mean, we're just going through them like water. This reduces down to 5, which is the Hierophant. I am the teacher of universal law. The Hierophant, which is like the high priest, as you know, probably the esoteric or exoteric rather, information masculine kind of mysteries. Says it's the caretaker of spiritual knowledge, teaching others what you know, awakening to a greater understanding of the world, and paying attention to the details. Raphael, what's the Galactic Heritage card for this episode?
So this is 140, so we got a number 5. In this case, we are at 32 of the Galactic Heritage cards, Zeta Reticuli, Linear Thinking, Past Timeline. When beings stop themselves from feeling emotion, especially fear, and resort to only logic to navigate through reality, reality becomes very limited. New ideas that don't conform to the formula of linear thinking are rejected without exploration. This card recommends that you look at your patterns of limited thinking and see how they restrict the experiences you have in life. Let yourself begin to think outside of the box and explore new ideas that previously seemed impossible. The Zetas had to do this in order to heal their species, and most likely, so will humans. Why not start now?
Now is the time, as they say. So, Alisha, out of curiosity, out of what we just read, is there anything that pops out or resonates really strongly?
Well, first of all, what a way to enter into the rabbit hole. That's a fun intro. Well, I like what you said about the Hierophant, just the spiritual teaching and knowledge and teaching what you know. And that's kind of what I'm here to do. That's what we're all here to do, right? Is kind of take your experiences and talk about them so that as other people maybe come into the same stuff, they have some reference points.
Right. And, I mean, just for the record, we had Candace Coe on the 105th episode, and so 35 episodes ago, and that's how I became aware of you. She came on, we were talking about Gene Keys. That day I bought the Gene Keys book, and I've been reading it with my fiance every morning, and we're kind of cracking that code. And today, ironically, we just started reading the Intro to Human Design. I've been just slacking on that. But we did just finish up a Venus cycle once it exited Gemini and entered Cancer recently. So that's a 7-year cycle. And even in the intro, I was talking about that. So I'm like, this is perfect timing. There's never not perfect timing. But my awareness of you is through Candace. Do me a favor and kind of just walk us through. I know you're in Costa Rica. I know you're doing a lot of stuff down there. You're even in the same kind of area, if not like neighborhood, literally as Kaipacha. Who's an astrologer that I've been following for a few years. And just kind of walk me through as much as or as little details as you want, like the Call Me Ishmael, and you can tell us where you're born, what kind of culture you were raised in, whatever's clever. But how did you get down to Costa Rica? How did you turn on to these kind of methodologies? And yeah, just fill us in on who thou art.
Perfect. I find it to be a rather interesting story. So let's start. Before about 2 years ago, I'd never played with astrology. I'd never heard of the Gene Keys. I'd never done human design. I'd never really looked into any of that type of stuff, which is crazy to think now because my days revolve around my intrigue and my obsession with it now. But I would tell you, like, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was just a total regular, normal, like, American girl that had a family, was working a corporate job for Dell in Austin, Texas, and I thought I was like living the dream. And then with the delivery of my last son about 4 years ago, I had a near-death experience. And so that's when stuff started getting really crazy. Just hints and clues and signs and, starting to become connected a little more with the sun, or even understanding the power of such a thing as a solar eclipse, which before I was awake, I just didn't realize those were big deals, that stuff was happening. It's like I don't go too deep into walk-in processes, but something happened to me on this day that made me start to evolve into a completely different person than I'd ever been in my entire life. And
you
it
got
wasn't
red pilled, as they say.
Yeah, I didn't have a choice. It was just like totally different world, and it was beautiful. It's like even through this near-death experience, I woke up from it, and it was like it wasn't traumatic. There wasn't any emotional shit that I had to get over. It was just like something literally. I walked into a new suit. I walked into a new body, or this old piece just was gone. And that's how everything. Honestly, if I look back now, I can see that I was really prepared for true surrender and detachment, like real detachment. And true ego death and that whole process, and meeting another partner and going through a divorce and like any and everything that could possibly happen.
Can you go a little into the details of what the walk-in process was for you? We've had some people on who call themselves walk-ins and know very discreetly kind of what occurred. They're from Sirius, et cetera, et cetera. What was the process like for you, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think I might look at it. I think we could look at walk-ins as many different processes, like a completely different being coming into your body. What I felt like it was for me was my true embodiment of my higher self coming into the body. Because even the process of what was happening to me, I was having these seizures that actually happened because the woman gave me too much medicine. It was total medical error. But it put me into these seizures. I was awake, consciously understanding that this was happening. And really, when you really think about why the body would shake, it would be to clear density and to bring in more light, is the way that I look at it now. I didn't know any of that type of understanding then, but that's what I believe that those seizures were doing. Clearing out the old density of what I might call my lower self, or my lower chakras, any traumas, fears, although I feel like I'd kind of always done a good job at cleaning that stuff without even knowing that was a goal in life, so that I could really embody this higher version of myself as a pretty regular consciousness.
Well, in that sense, like Neo is doing a pretty good job as Mr. Anderson in a corporate office as a hacker and all that shit. So you were doing the work at a level, but then it seems like you got smacked upside the head a little with the next phase, so to speak. Did you feel like missional? And it's funny because I don't remember too who's been on the walk we've had. I don't remember her exactly, but I'm pretty sure it had some walks, or like you just like that. You're a Scorpio sun, so
Just briefly, Jim, as I'm not sure how well you're coming through, Alisha, can you understand him well right now?
No, thanks for asking. It was really choppy, so let's see if I can hear you again.
So Jim, maybe just reconnect. I have a question for you in the meantime, just in terms of background construct and so on. As Jim said, obviously you've been doing the work in a sense as Mr. Anderson, working for Dell, as you explained. Of course, I'd be curious to know what you did there and how you would say this potentially may actually have prepared you for your journey afterwards, in terms of, the pieces you picked up or the things you were exploring, or why even, work for a big computer company. That's, a decision unto itself as well, especially as I can only imagine Dell would rather be of the, not so much the startup, but potentially more of the corporate type.
Yeah, I was totally in the Matrix. I was totally in a different world back then. I hadn't thought of any of this type of stuff, right? So for me, I was just a girl that grew up in a small town that didn't have a lot of money, and mom and dad worked like hard jobs with 4 kids. So to me, when I kind of just moved my way up, I still dropped out of college. Like I knew I went and I was like, that's not for me. But then I ended up after some interesting experiences, I ended up in Austin, Texas, and the job just kind of found me. So here I was, I started through a temp agency because I didn't have the experience and I didn't have the college education. And then right when I got in, I just very easily moved my way up and started kind of in the inside sales department where people would call and like order their home PC back in the day before people ordered stuff online. This was in '05. And then soon after, I actually met my husband there, who was from Florida, and so am I. So that was interesting. But then it ended up, by the end of my job there, I was kind of like the inside account manager working with outside account executives that were building data centers and storage and software as a service.
Software as a service, yes.
Sorry, my phone closed. Software service, server storage. I didn't have to know all the technical stuff, but it was data center stuff, right? Supporting these data centers of law firms and large corporations and stuff like that. So I'd be the girl on the phone, like working with them to kind of set up appointments with my smart guys that were out in the field in Chicago or in New York or whoever I was working with. And I really thought I was living the dream at that time, and then one day and this was before the near death thing, but little things just started to wake me up. So, I went from this broke girl growing up to this nice corporate job. I've got the 4,000 square foot house. I've got the cars. I'm having kids. I'm living the American dream. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I thought was the American dream. That's kind of what was put into me. And so I was like really kicking ass at it. But as other opportunities started to come to me, I started to realize, like, is this what I want? Do I want to work like a 9-to-5 job every day? Like, is this what it's really about? I think I need to buy all these things, so I need to have a job so I can make enough money to pay for those things, and then maybe I get a vacation once or twice a year, and then I'll do a home renovation on my kitchen. Like, that was, you know what I'm saying? This was this little world that I lived in until now, where I'm like, I can't even remember being that girl.
Well, we all go through phases. Can you guys hear me a little better now?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Word. I think something that we tend to do, and I'm not sure if it's our kind of, achievement oriented culture or our egos or what, but we tend to beat ourselves up for where we've been. And it's like, it's all good and necessary to get us where we are now. And the trajectories, push us in different ways based off of the quantum now or whatever. So don't beat yourself up too much. And in another way, it kind of, seeing the American system from a high, successful standpoint makes you realize just how shallow it is. It's a big shell game of like competition and non-enjoyment and just kind of fakeness. I mean, not just America. I think Western systems in general tend to do this. So it's interesting because, yeah, you've seen it from the inside that like achievement, like getting to the top of the ladder in a certain way or, up that ladder doesn't necessarily mean happiness.
Totally. I was happy fitting into when I checked the list of these boxes, if this was the thing, but deep down it was like, this isn't it. And so I'm so grateful for it too, because God, all of our life is a school, right? That's really all this is we're just going through these phases, kind of picking up information. Right after that, I had started a job. Another thing that kind of fell into my lap, like I really feel like I've always just kind of been led without having to really make stuff happen. It just kind of happens. And, I started this direct sales network marketing company. I never would have thought I'd do something like this. And, I did this challenge to lose weight, doing this stuff. And I started just crazy. I started making like $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month, $15,000 a month, $20,000 a month. Like, we were banking with this company. And I ended up, of course, leaving my corporate job. And that's when I started to get a little free. That's when I started to realize things, because I wasn't so busy working all the time and like going through the motions. So here I really was getting a glimpse of this like time freedom, not working so much and still bringing in abundance, bringing in money. And then that's when I think I had a little more time on my hands to start thinking about things. And I started peeling away at like, I don't know, the programs around religion that were still somehow in my body, even though I didn't practice anything. Or
culture's one hell of a drug, as McKenna said, it's not really our friend. And it's like the imprinting process, especially in the West, we have a few things that just get like lodged in there. Whether they're ontologically true or not is a different argument, but we get patternings that, stick, whether we you choose to drink the Kool-Aid or not, ultimately.
Exactly. I think that's what started to come to me too, is I started to be a pattern breaker. Like I started to see the patterns, and I would be like, wait a minute. And all of a sudden it was like, wait, the military? Do I really agree with that? Does that really make me proud to be an American? Like I started to just question the things that were just programs before that were totally like, I was just coasting, through with these programs. And then you see them and you dismantle them. And that's what I started. I don't know, this is probably still the competitive drive in me, that I would be like, oh, well, that was easy. Observe a program, see a pattern, become the observer, clear the pattern. And I didn't really learn this in any way. It just kind of started coming to me. And then
So between the jobs and that kind of fact that you just mentioned in terms of your personality or whatever, do you see, and don't get too jargon heavy because we haven't gotten into the human designer gene key. Are there anything specifically in those systems that make you say, that's why this is happening?
I don't know if I have an open head and an open ajna, so the two top open spaces. So I do believe that those can hold more like kind of channeled inner guidance, maybe even without us realizing it. And so maybe that was what was kind of coming in and kind of helping me go through this. I'm not sure. It just kind of started to click to me that I could see these things that were, and I read like the four agreements, for an example, like a basic book. And it just got me into like observing myself instead of being in the bodysuit and experiencing all this emotion and turbulence. I started being like, well, that makes sense. Become the observer, step outside the body, look down at yourself, watch yourself, observe it all. Are you taking things personal? Just such basic stuff, right? But it was like, what it was teaching me was self-mastery, really.
It's funny, I don't know if you've seen the Netflix show Midnight Gospel. It's with Duncan Trussell. It's really funny and interesting. It's only like 8 episodes, maybe like 2 hours altogether. And it's kind of like a very surreal, kind of psychedelic, woke-ish thing. It's really funny. But the 5th episode specifically has to do with Buddhism and DMT, and some guy talking about that. But he's talking about in that episode about like how it's almost like I've never played World of Warcraft, but it's like we get into our bodysuit so much and we start grinding out and just like getting so tunnel visioned with our in our meat suits, you know what I mean? Like our culture, our programming, all this stuff that we don't even realize, like you're saying, that we have an ability to kind of hold on loosely, kind of like Yoda style, like just, observe, feel with your emotions, all this kind of stuff, not just thinking things out and like acting, reacting. So it's funny because I think that is a large part of the awakening process. I mean, Buddha does mean awake, so I think that this doesn't surprise me. I need to do it more. I'm a double Gemini, so I need to do it more often probably. But we're probably in our best modalities when we're kind of, it's like Wu Wei in I forget what I forget the religion or whatever, Taoism, Wu Wei, where it's just like, flow with it, be water. And it's like, that doesn't mean you detach so much that, you aren't in your body. It's not like rejecting, it's not Gnosticism where it's like, this is a bad meat suit and I got to escape. Oh my God. But there's this level of embeddedness and kind of like participation with the culture, the mental kind of constructs, as well as the physical kind of routines and identifications that, most people don't realize, like, it's something to learn on. No one can show you, Morpheus can show you the door. You got to walk the path kind of thing. Like, knowing that it's a possibility is half the battle. Some people don't even know it's a thing. They're just like, drink coffee, go to work 9 to 5, have sex, have kids, eat a burger, go America, go Dallas Cowboys. It's like that kind of thing. Where it's just like, oh.
I went through all that stuff. The Go Dallas Cowboys part 2. That's so crazy.
And just as you mentioned that, in a way, one could have said that, being in that job and having, 4,000 square foot house, all of these things sound super fancy. And then even afterwards, generating that much money through direct sales or whatever. And now I assume, but you will talk more about this, of course, potentially switching again, maybe also making 10 grand a month with astrology. I don't know. Also, you don't need to tell me. But what I'd be super curious about is how your parents reacted, like to your, let's say, changes of direction. Because what I'm especially curious about is that oftentimes it seems individuals that are not as self-observant, in some way, shape, or form, they carry, let's say, images of or ideas of the expectations, especially of their parents, and of course of their environment within them. So I could I really don't know, and you will tell me, but I could imagine that your parents might have been super happy initially when they say, oh, you made it, you achieved all those things that maybe they would have wanted to provide to you, or kind of, it almost seems like that's a trajectory you were set up to do if already you were, let's say, simply choosing to, in a sense, progress or evolve, but then realizing, let's say, how should I say, the non-feasibility or non-happiness factor in that, and changing directions again. Also here, I'd be curious how your parents reacted, or how your own relationship changed, or your own expectations that you had of yourself, all of these ideas.
Yeah, good question. It's interesting for you to ask that question because recently I've had these visions of my parents almost being like these ascended masters that came here to just kind of bring me here and allow me to do my thing. It's I've even asked them, I've even messaged my mom and dad and been like, who are you guys really? Like, who are you? Because I feel like they're more than, they're not even my mom and dad in the sense of of attachment to daughters and children, and controlling and telling them what to do. I think it's something I've always loved about my parents. I grew up in some pretty hard times. They were always working hard. My dad used to party, like the whole thing. And then my dad kind of had an awakening spontaneously when he was when I was in high school. And I didn't know what was happening then. I was just starting to go to church just so I could get out of the house and go like spend the night at a friend's house, because he was like the strict dad or whatever. But he had this awakening that kind of happened. He totally changed from a different person to another. I could possibly even say that was a walk-in experience for him, whether he knows it or not. I don't know. And it's interesting too, we share the same codes in human design, which is interesting because this is all based on birth date stuff, not that he's my father. So there's some interesting ties there too. But they've always been like the neutral supporters. And I used to, I think, judge my dad for being kind of detached. Like he never made a big deal about birthdays, and he never I don't know, somehow my parents stayed married the whole time too, but and still are, but because they had me when they were like 17 and 18, they were young kids. So maybe that's another reason why too, they feel like my brothers and sisters. But so I started breaking through programs. I'd say even when I started to go to college, I was a smart girl, first girl to go in my family. And I got there and I was like, this isn't for me. I think I just want to make money, get out on my own, do my own thing. And I just kind of followed that. So I think I got really good at disappointing if they had any expectations, which they weren't quite like that. It was always
so
my
it wasn't like the Von
grandparents.
Trapp family. How were they like, you gotta come to the whistle call? It seems like it was a little more lax, which is ideal in a lot of ways.
Well, it's funny thinking of growing up. Dad was so strict on me. I couldn't do anything. I never went to like high school parties. They had me young, right? So my dad's only goal in his life was not for his daughter not to be like a high school pregnant girl or something like that. That was his goal. And
Don't do what I did. Don't do what I did.
Yeah, exactly. He made sure that I didn't do that. And so I couldn't even like sneak out to a party to go have a drink or sneak around or whatever. It was pretty tight. And so I needed to get out on my own to be able to do my own thing. So yeah, it's interesting that he was like that growing up, like total dad gel. And then coming out of it though, he's my homeboy. Like he's my dad, but he's my equal. He's never really been like, I'm your father, do what I say. And in this lifetime, in the old one, as when I was younger, yes. So that's taken a lot of pressure off of me. But also I just think I started to learn like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I just did it based on my programming of what I thought was the right thing. But it usually did still break through some people's standards, ideas of normal. Like even leaving my corporate job that was very successful. My husband and I at the time, we both worked at Dell. We both left our jobs to do this direct sales thing. And, and not everybody thinks direct sales is the coolest thing in the world, right? And I was never the person trying to sell my friends stuff. But, there was definitely like that funny feeling about it. Like I had to be cool with myself to be willing to do that. I had to really not care about what anybody else thought. So I started building that kind of fortitude up, I think, which has helped me in the now with the different things that have happened. since then, which I haven't even got to start telling you guys even half the story.
It's all good. So maybe when I was breaking up choppy earlier, I just wanted to kind of clarify when you had the walk-in experience, the near-death experience as a Scorpio, which I think Maru Matu, the other one, has some aspects of Scorpio. I forget her chart exactly. It seems like maybe a flavor that can happen more on that level or something. Was it very visceral? Was it like, like you, I think you kind of addressed it, but basically it's like, I was wondering, you got a drug overdose or wrong prescription, like your body quaking and stuff. What was the immediate thing? Did you think you were crazy, or were you right away just like, oh, I'm a different person now, or how did that work?
I think it was just a natural over time process because so in the middle of the situation, they ended up intubating me and knocking me out. And then I woke up. And from there was still like what in the hell happened, right? Like as I was going under though, I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going to die right now. I guess I'm going to go. And that was it. And I didn't have any like magical light or anything like that. They
rather stoic. He's like, I guess this is it.
And this is before I knew anything about totality or like, this is before I even knew anything. But I don't know. It's so interesting when I think back. And there is a connection. I don't know if you all are familiar with Wayne Dyer. He's not so much on the psychedelic side, right? But he's woke. And he was kind of a first awakener for me. And what's interesting is my son was born on his birthday. So Wayne Dyer died in August on my first son's birthday. And then 9 months, and then I got pregnant right after that. And the baby was born on Wayne Dyer's birthday. And I had this, so I always have felt like he's kind of a
super resonator in your
reality. He
reality.
is deeply in my fractal line, is the way I guess I would really look at it.
As far as I'm concerned, he's like a motivational speaker. But for the record, Team Rabbit Hole is about psychedelics just as a tool, but it's not like we're like, if you don't trip, man, you're not woke. It's like there's plenty of ways, holotropic breathing, whatever. Just Wayne Dyer, for fuck's sake. So what's his shtick exactly?
I would have thought back then when I was listening to it and I was in my basic levels of awareness that it was just motivational stuff, but it's not that at all. It's pure consciousness. He just says it in this nice little man way. And then like as I'm awake now, I don't really listen to much of anything anymore. I just listen to myself. But if I go back and listen to something now, I'm like, whoa, he's diving into deep layers of energy and frequency and creating your reality. But I couldn't pick that up then.
For those with ears to hear, it's there.
It was there the whole time, right? So he was clearly talking through my unconscious, my subconscious the whole time, but I was picking up what I could, right? So I was picking up the basics of like, there's no justified resentments and forgiveness and all that kind of stuff that you have to go through.
That's a big shit. I mean, that's big deal stuff. That's like Christianity in a nutshell, in a way.
Well, exactly. That's what I really had to look at. And he's the one. It would be simple stuff like that. He would say, there are no justified resentments. And that would be enough for me to be like, oh, well, that makes sense. Like, why do I need to hold any resentments to anything? If it's just messing me up, I don't really need to play that game. So I'd be like, do I resent anybody for anything? And I'd kind of go through the list.
Let go of those hot coals that are burning you on kind of thing.
And that was kind of that was my work before the near-death stuff, right? It was little stuff like that and, not taking things personal, right? So it was basic. It was Wayne Dyer and the Four Agreements, that kind of stuff. And so, the last thing, the only other thing, so I didn't have any conscious experiences of anything happening. I just woke up and I was like, wow, that was interesting. Maybe a couple tears and like, oh, am I a mom? Like, did I have a kid? And then from there, I just didn't go through any emotional process. I think things just started very slow and just the transition kept happening. And then they also say too, I don't know, you guys probably don't know this, but I guess, and I didn't know this then, but when you're breastfeeding your child, it's activating your pineal gland. And so there's some kind of connection hormonally. There's some kind of connection hormonally between nursing, like it's way deeper. So think about this from a programmed perspective, like most people don't nurse anymore. It's just, or I don't want to say most people, but the C-sections, the not nursing, think about what C-sections is actually doing, right? It's actually removing that real spiritual process of grounding in soul through the body. It's cutting it out mechanically. It's bypassing this natural process. It's like a body activation in a way. And nursing is kind of, I think, the same thing. These things are playing with the pineal gland. It's activating. You're bringing the hormones down. So you're activating and bringing all this goodness from your upper body down into your body. So that was a part of my awakening too, right? So I had the near death, and then I've got this baby, and I'm nursing and all, and I'm looking at the world a little bit differently. And so, so I didn't have anything official like you are a walk-in or this is a walk-in, and I didn't even know of that type of concept then. And then about a year and a half later, it was the solar eclipse of 2017 in August. And something
The Great American Eclipse.
The Great American Eclipse.
I was in Switzerland during that, so I wasn't even in America, but it looked pretty ratchet.
It was cool. But again, back then I didn't understand that. Like, now I understand when an eclipse is coming, something's going to happen within your individual self, within the collective self. Things happen, noticeable, normally measurable. Sometimes though, you could say they're quantum leaps or timeline jumps without any of us really realizing it. That's kind of one thing that I feel like happens. But anyways, at this moment, so I'm going to go woman on you real quick, but at this moment that the sun was coming in and we're all wearing these glasses and whatever, I hadn't had a period in 2 years because I was nursing and pregnant. As the sun came in with this eclipse, I started bleeding. And there was something telling me there was a deep connection with the sun and the eclipse energy and my body. And that was the first time I was like, okay, what is this? Why is this happening? Who am I? And I started to think, you know what? I think I need to talk to a psychic. That was the first time I thought about doing that, because again, this is the old religious programming. I thought horoscopes were cool, and I was proud to be a Scorpio, but I stayed away from that stuff. I stayed away from I've never touched tarot cards or, went to a psychic or anything like that. That's when stuff started coming, like, okay, you need to get connected and guided. And I ended up connecting with this woman in Austin. I didn't even use her psychic services. I just started listening to her podcast, and she was just taking me into the quantum. I went from like no knowledge of this to like understanding ascension, and I'd never heard of it, but it's been going on for years. But it was like I was caught up to it very quickly. And then eventually that kind of led to selling the big house, going to a smaller, more country house, simplifying life, not putting so much of a demand on working. And then the job I was doing, the network marketing stuff, wasn't resonating because I woke up. And so I didn't like the ingredients we were using. I actually didn't feel good about sharing that stuff with people. And I was actually kind of willing to let it go. So the money started not mattering to me at all. My identity, money, and eventually the dimension of time. So I would say like time and money were like starting, the value of them and the importance in my life, it started to kind of disappear. And then eventually we just kind of randomly, but not really, my husband and our 3 kids were like, hey, we're going to go to Costa Rica for the summer. I'm going to take a breath.
I mean, this is like within the past 1,000 days. I just want to put it in context. Like, you were talking 2017, that's August. I mean, we're only in August 2020. That's, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is a lot of change happening very rapidly.
This is true. This is true surrender, and this is true ascension, I would say, because it has gone fast. And it's really just because I started to realize this is just a game we're playing. And it doesn't mean that you don't love the characters in it. And it doesn't mean you're like heartless and bypassing. It's like, we're playing a game here. We're creating our reality here. We're remembering who we really are here. And if you keep holding on to the stuff you think you need to hold on to, that your human does, you can't play the game. So it just,
you at least play it very differently, right?
Yeah, I guess we're all always playing the game, but I wanted to see the most fun outcomes happen. And my way that might have still been tainted with just a little bit of fear or programming that I couldn't see or whatever, I couldn't. So that's what I mean. Like, everything just started to happen rapidly, because here I am now. I don't want to do this job anymore. That's been my job for about five or 6 years, which taught me so much. You know what I really learned from that job? Because I was helping people lose weight and make money to leave their jobs. Here's what I learned. Most people hate their life. They're exhausted. They're overweight. They hate their job. They might even hate their spouse. They're not happy. That's what I learned from talking to so many people. And so it
Some
was
Fight
like,
Club shit. It's like we're all just consuming and fucking coping,
you know,
basically.
that's what it was. And I was getting a glimpse of this because I'd get on these calls, not just with people I met. In fact, it wasn't normally me meeting them, would be people on my team that were meeting people and saying, I want you to talk to Alisha and hear her story, and I want her to share with you. Because my story was a success story of, you know, I lost weight and I sold these products and I left my corporate job and I had more time freedom. You know, that was it. And that was the truth. And then I actually started really helping other people do it, not just like pretend dragging them along. So that's why I was making money, because I was actually doing it. But these people would be, you know, just lost. And so
severely disjointed at a different level than just maybe like a couple extra pounds. I mean, that's
right.
a symptom of it at some level.
That's what I started to notice. I was like, damn, this is all emotional. This has nothing to do with physical stuff. This is like, I mean, yeah, eat right, exercise, whatever, but the thoughts, the settling, like that's what's wrong, right? That we are robotically going through these realities, like not happy, doing shit that we thought was what we're supposed to do. So we're supposed to be happy with it, but we're not happy and we're exhausted all the time. Like if you're exhausted all the time, you're not in alignment with what you're supposed to be doing here. Because when you are aligned, life force energy is flowing through you. You are magic all day, every day. That's just how it works. There's never not an overabundance of energy that could be flowing through our bodies at any given time for us to feel so free, for us to feel these high frequencies, blissful ecstasy states as our natural state. If we're willing to let go of all the stuff that we think is what matters, but most people aren't willing to. I still notice there's a little fear around surrender sometimes.
Oh, obviously. I mean, I think one of the things we're told in the Western context is like, you know, you're in control of a lot of things. So then we feel a responsibility to do it right. And then we're looking at outside of ourselves instead of our inner authority and stuff like in the human design to be like, what do they do so I can do it? And I've got to please mom and dad or the Pope or whatever the fuck. And it just gets into like disempowerment and compromise at high levels to the degree where, you know, I mean, it doesn't. I mean, I'm sure some people struggle with obesity at a level where it's like genetic maybe or something like that, but most people are just like, I have a shitty job that I hate, so I'm going to grab some quick food and a coffee from Starbucks. And it's like over a long period of time,
Actually,
that shit wrecks you up. What's up, Raphael?
no, there's a direct question associated because, first of all, of course, thank you for obviously at least knowing some glimpse of what's up, Alisha. I wholeheartedly agree with your assessment. My question would be, Bashar sometimes talks about obesity, and one image he provides that I think is quite fitting is it says that quite a few times when people gain a lot of weight, it may be that they are quote unquote afraid to be flying away spiritually. So they kind of, you know,
They're like improperly grounding themselves.
Yeah, introduce more and more weight because again, you know, kind of they're afraid to surrender actually in a sense, or afraid in some unconscious way of these higher densities, let's say. Would you agree with that assessment potentially, as you say that you've spoken with quite a few of such individuals?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. What I see it as is just density, fear, emotion, trauma that's held and stored in the body, right? And then, I mean, it doesn't mean too that people that are not highly aware and conscious could be holding on to weight. And I guess even then, I mean, I think there's this rule around like, I don't know, sometimes I would find that people would tell me I need to be grounded, for an example, and I would be like, no, I feel like this idea of whatever grounded means sometimes in the context it might be used in is to tell me not to fly, and I want to fly. I'm not afraid of flying. I'm not trying to ground myself back into, I'm trying to ground the divine or the higher frequencies into my human reality, into my physical body. That's really what I kind of feel like we're here to do, is to bring the God into the man, to bring the heaven to earth. And so I'm grounding in those high frequencies, and I can't do that if I don't fly up there. But I do think it's density in the body. So I've shared this message with so many people, and I started really addressing things on an emotional level too. You know, just that emotional connection of, you know, people don't even know that they're like holding on to stuff. This is in the regular world, right? Because most of it's in the matrix. So they don't know, they're not seeing these are maybe their first layers of awakening when you start to put the mind, body, emotion connection together. I think that can be a big awakener for some people.
Totally. I mean, it's like Jesus said, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing, basically, right? Or Buddha's like, ignorance is the issue. Like, wake up. It's funny because what you're saying, it sounds like when people say ground in a kind of like, in a sense, it's being like, get in first gear and stay there. And you're like, I can go to fourth and I'm not redlining. And that freaks people out. And I think that's where the disconnect kind of happens. For like, same thing with, I think, psychological disorders, quote unquote, like people who are manic or bipolar or whatever, all these things. It's like ADD. Like maybe there's some level of that as a reality, but I think it's a different way of operating and being in that reality, and it just doesn't fit the standard model in a way. So it kind of makes the unwoke collective like kind of grit their teeth and say, conform, please, because the Borg wants you in, and you're not doing that.
Yeah, and I can understand what it felt like to be on that side. Like even looking back at, like, I had 3 C-sections with my kids and I didn't need to have a C-section with any of them. Or when I went to the doctor because I was having chest pains and she was like, oh, you're totally fine. You work at Dell. This is normal. Here, everybody takes this. And she gave me Prozac and Ativan. And it was like, she didn't even ask me like how my emotions were, what my stress levels were, like what I was doing to help with my stress or physical activity, none of that holistic stuff, right? But back then I was just trusting the doctor. I was just trusting the system. I thought they really had my best interest in mind. So I didn't question any of it. There was no skepticism. And then I started taking medicine. I was like, damn, this is good. My life is easy. I'm floating through this stuff. And then I was like, wait a minute. Who am I? I don't have any emotions. I'm completely cut off from my body right now. I can't even cry at like an emotional, touching like commercial that I would cry at before. Like I have no sense of touch with my emotions anymore. So then I'm glad I went through these experiences, because now I understand it's a part of the programming in a way that you can see how these things cut you off from knowing yourself. Because that's really what this game's all about, is just knowing yourself. And there's many ways that we figure that out, but a lot of the tools and a lot of the doctors and a lot of the things being recommended out there are taking you away from knowing yourself. And it's not till you do know yourself that you're able to make those sovereign choices, and yeah, for so long I trusted these systems and trusted these doctors and thought they had my best interest in mind, and then you realize they don't. And so it does help me have so much deep compassion. There's no judgment for me when I see someone there, because I'm like, you just don't know till you know, and you
It's like
don't
Plato's
know.
cave.
Yeah, and you're not ready to know until you know, right? Like you can't force somebody to know.
That's not even our job in a way. I think some darker or maybe weird part of the New Age kind of whatever movement is like, be the change and show the people the light on the way. Don't force feed people red pills. Morpheus gave him an option. He had to make free will decisions. We want to coax people into newer and higher levels of, and improved levels of reality through volition and not coercion. I think the problem that we're kind of discussing with the system, when you thought they had their best, they had their intentions and programs in mind, and not so much yours. They're like, yeah, of course your heart's getting ripped in pieces, and you're having cognitive dissonance, and like, here's some drugs to make that symptom go away so you can perform better for our agenda, essentially, which is, I mean, at worst very, very nefarious, at least very ignorant and kind of like inherited kind of whatever. Quick question, what do you think was happening with Dell people and their hearts? What the fuck's up with that?
Well, I mean, I don't know that everything was heart problems there as much as my chest pain just happened to be an indication of stress. So that was just it. Everybody's stressed out. And it was before working from home days and, more flexibility in the jobs, and, you're overworked and you're stressed out and all that matters is the job. And, I mean, it was that, right? It's just not being aligned. And no wonder why, like back then I was really into happy hours. I couldn't wait for 5 o'clock to just take a few shots. I couldn't wait for Friday night and Saturday and Sunday to watch football and drink beer and totally zone out from my life, basically. Even though I felt like a happy person, like by no means was I miserable or anything like that. But it's interesting to think, yeah, you can just be out of touch without realizing you're out of touch. And then the medicine is a tricky thing, right? Because it relieves the stress, but you aren't doing any work about it. You're just numbing yourself through the same process your body's still going through it. You just don't realize it. So the chemical stuff is just, it's interesting to look back on it now, because the other day I was talking with a friend and she was like, gosh, I don't know what it is. This girl just jacked me up. Like, she's got me all upset and da da da. And she's like, what am I really supposed to be seeing here? And I was like, the first thing we've got to realize is we're really just here to play this chemical game in the body. We're here to become masters of the chemicals of our body. And if we really can tune in and start to become aware of it, you can see how when you even think of a certain person, chemicals release in the body. You think of a certain memory, those are chemicals that bring you those feelings. And so you start to get in tune with that kind of stuff, right? No, the doctors aren't teaching you that. But this is how we don't need medicine for this stuff necessarily. This is getting in tune with this intelligent system that's always communicating with us and kind of teaching us how to step out of turbulence. The turbulence is to tell us we need to check the engine light, you know.
And we have a culture that basically both culturally and chemically allows for bypassing, quite frankly. So it is what it is. I think in a Bashar sense, we permitted ourselves to do this. You know, we've signed up for this. And then, I mean, it's funny because I don't know how it's said exactly. Raphael said it before, where it's like Earth school is very different and maybe more hardcore than a lot of other schools. So it's like we've forgotten everything and the stakes are really high and the systems, you know, you got to wake up, like you got to swim upstream kind of thing. So it's like, it's a tricky show that we're all on the stage of here in the West especially, but also in Earth in general. So what was the process? You just went on a vacation to Costa Rica and then you just said, hell yeah, we're going to stay here? Or how'd that go?
Yeah, I was avoiding a big leadership conference that I needed to do for the network marketing company that I was in. And I was like, God, I don't even want to be a part of this anymore. So how can I get out of it? And I was like, let's go to another country for 2 months. So we went for the summer. We're like, oh, we're just going to go on a vacation and our kids will learn Spanish here. And it's funny to think back then, people thought we were so crazy that we were going to do that. It's really funny because things just got more crazy. We had even created an Instagram called, my last name's Hall, so it was called Hall's Gone Wild. And like, that wasn't even the wildest of it, because once we got here, that's when all the wild shit started to really happen. So yeah, I would say like within 1 to 2 weeks, we had landed in this community. We felt really safe about it. Well, first, I'd actually went to receive my Reiki Master Teacher certification, which I never ended up using. I learned about Reiki. I was interested. It's part of the awakening process. This can happen. Just like sometimes in the awakening, we think we need to share with others or convert others. That's a common piece of awakening that some of us go through. And then this last part was like, oh, Reiki, that sounds right. I'm interested in that. And I'm not saying that it doesn't work by any means. I really felt like it was more of a school to educate me a little more on education, but I kind of felt like it was a tradition, and no disrespect to traditional systems, but I was like, I think I'm doing energy work without even really, I don't have to make symbols. I don't have to make signs.
I'm a self-initiate. I don't need to go through the academy. What's going on here?
You know what I mean? That's what I started to figure out, but it was still cool to go through. So we got here, go to the Reiki Master Teacher thing. And this is what I know now.
So that's what led you to that valley, that particular area? It was like, the Reiki person's here, let's go on a vacay.
No, we decided to go to Costa Rica first. And then I was like, well, you know what? I've done my Reiki 1 and 2. Let me see. It'd just be cool to get my master here. And I found a lady up in the mountains in Monteverde. So that's where we went first. Then I just kept looking up places. I wasn't looking specifically for an intentional community. I wasn't looking for anything too specific. I was just looking for a house we could stay in for about a month. And so I started looking online. And that's how I found this neighborhood, which is really a community, not so much an Airbnb normally thing. And as I was reading about it, again, I didn't realize the significance of it at the time, but it was like, you know, on a crystal quartz mountain with a river and yoga deck and saltwater pool. And it was just like, it was the life, right? So I was like, well, I want to stay here for a month. It sounds beautiful. So that's how we kind of ended up in the community. And right away, it felt safe. You know, it felt like, dang, we could live here. We could do this. Because I think a lot of people, before they come to a foreign country, especially with kids, they're thinking about safety, you know, stuff for the kids, education, like all the stuff. And so we felt like we had all of that there. And and talk about culture, right? Like I really thought there was only America before I came. I mean, I'd been to Mexico and I understand there's other cultures out there, but until you get out into the world, you don't really understand. You don't really know. You don't really get to connect with these other cultures. So there's, maybe 40 houses and maybe 30 different countries represented inside. And actually, if anybody watches Netflix, the Zac Efron episode is the third episode's Costa Rica, and it's my kids' school and it's the neighborhood. So I'm sure a lot of people have probably watched it. It's a really interesting show.
What show is that? I don't know what you're talking about.
It's called Down to Earth. It just came out, and it's just a series that Zac Efron did where he traveled around to all these different places, and he's kind of showing like eco living and permaculture and different things that are, I think, pretty awakening. I don't watch TV though, so I did
it's a
go
step
watch.
in the direction. I mean, if you're going to show people stuff, this is the kid from High School Musical?
Yes.
Okay, word. I mean, hey, it takes all kinds.
It does. So he's really bringing awareness. Like so many people are coming and looking in this area now, and but that'll give anybody that's interested a glimpse of really seeing the neighborhood and seeing the school, and I want more people to look because I've learned what I enjoyed about that community, and then also what I didn't, and it's kind of given me ideas of like, I'm not the person that would like manage the whole thing, but I kind of do feel like at some point more people will want to come here and they will want to be a part of something that maybe is brewing inside of me or brewing inside of this country that's bringing people here, because I've watched it happen. I'm watching the patterns of the people that come and when they come and why they come and what happens to them when they get here, because I really do feel like there's a galactivation in this land is what I like to call it. There's something significant that happens to anybody that comes here, and it's not necessarily on the map as like one of the chakras of the earth or anything like that, although we're near Titicaca, which is the sacral chakra. So I would say that we carry a lot of the sacral energy if we look at things that way. But so here I come to this community and I really don't even know how I got there. And so we decide within 2 weeks we're going to sell everything in Texas and we're going to move here and just rent for now. And then that's when everything went a little crazy. Hold on, I'm going to take a breath.
That's cool. Maybe it's a good time to kind of take a music break if you wanted to kind of, recalibrate. It's funny because, it sounds like the process of surrender isn't a one-stop shop. It's like it's a continual surrendering and layering of the onion, and when you get to its plateaus, you get up to the top of the ledge, and there's another step, and it's a constant evolutionary process. I'm kind of curious as to what the quality of Quartz Mountain or whatever you're saying is, like how that feels and stuff.
Yeah. Well, it felt magical from the minute I got here. There's something different about Costa Rica in general. The land is so preserved. It's mountains, it's jungle, it's green. I have toucans flying in front of me, monkeys in my backyard. I'm back to this magical quartz river. We go down to the river and we can pull out crystal quartz and sometimes amethyst. My daughter can always find the amethyst. It's like she has X-ray vision for it, or honestly,
She's
I feel
an
like
amethyst dowser.
She is, and I think she honestly is just in such a different dimension that she sees things that don't even exist in my dimension, She's 9, but she's deep. So yeah, right away there was an energy here that I never wanted to leave. And Costa Rica hasn't had a military since the 40s. There's just something about it here, and it's ocean. I mean, I'm surrounded by oceans, rivers, animals, preserved wildlife, so many trees, so much green. It is heaven on earth. Like, I think there's pictures out there that are like heaven on earth, and this is it for me. But I also think it's like carries the image of heaven on earth, the rainbows, the butterflies, all of it. It's just magical. So I'm not so sensitive to stones and things like that, though, I would say. So I don't necessarily I don't feel things in the same way people feel them. I just know I'm supposed to be here. I know I'm supposed to bring high frequency into my body here. That's it. So, but there are some people that come and they're knocked out by this energy.
Like,
they
I'm
have
puking,
to take a rest.
It's like, oh shit. I've had a bunch, like we said, a few people we know and some friends outside of the podcast Actually, Corey's been on the podcast, who've gone down to Costa Rica. I've lived in Honolulu and Hawaii for a few years. I've been to Switzerland and Ecuador and random places. So I've seen some, quote, beautiful, picturesque places. And Costa Rica does look like it has a quality of that heaven on earth kind of situation. Let's go ahead and play a quick song, and we can come back and kind of talk about it maybe looked, it was situated and good at first, but I know that the tumult and changes kept coming, right? So this is a Stereolab song called Eye of the Volcano, which I thought was maybe appropriate because I think you're around volcanoes.
And here we are once again.
I thought those lyrics were rather poignant considering what we were just talking about. It's talking about like fascism winning because like we turn our bodies into machines and they've hijacked reality and all this kind of stuff. So the hypocrisy of our time, freedom, like we're saying, like God bless America and the wars and stuff. It's like, that's not freedom, Anyway, where we're kind of getting it to where maybe the gears shifted for your picturesque holiday or whatever in Costa Rica, kind of take us down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, that was a perfect song. I loved it. I actually, what'd she say? Prophecy of our time, so in love with freedom. And that's the thing, the definition of freedom changed, right? Like I thought it was the other thing, but now I'm living true freedom, like true liberation, true freedom. Like there are no rules. Like I am my sovereign self, and I go where I am led and where I'm guided based on energy. And like, that's to me what I feel like is freedom, like no fears about what anybody thinks. And I had to bust through all of that. So that's what happened when I got here, was the ego death, because I would say about a month after we got here, we meet this guy. He's a energy healer and he's a massage therapist, a Thai massage therapist. And he came over and gave DH, my husband at the time, a massage, and my mom, who was visiting from Florida, and then me. And something happened when I saw this man. And physically, I would never have put, like, this is, first of all, to give you an idea of what my marriage was like, that was the perfect part. I'd been with him for 14 years. Like, we'd mastered relationships together. There was nothing, like, there were no fights or arguments or wounded child type of stuff. So we were kind of like the dream couple, I would say. I don't want to say that like that, but we were an inspiring couple, I would say, in the regular world.
Doing it right.
So when I got here, exactly, living it's the American Dream program is what I was calling it. And so, but not faking it, like truly beautiful. So we meet this man, and I remember getting ready for my massage, and it's not like any other massage. I'm sitting in front of him, Indian style, and he looks like some kind of Buddha. And and I had this frankincense diffusing, and something happened when we looked at each other's eyes. But it wasn't like, oh, I'm so attracted to this guy. It wasn't something like that. It was something like I couldn't control whatever was happening. I couldn't describe what was happening. It wasn't so much a sexual thing. It was something way deeper. And at the time, I didn't know of these stories or concepts of like twins and twin souls and twin flames. Like I hadn't heard of that stuff yet, because all the awakening part of those types of stories unfolding happened once I got here. I'd never heard of a PD until I got here. I'd never heard of so many of these different things until I got here. And then that's when this other stuff started unfolding. So anyways, something happened that day, and I didn't know what it was. It was just a feeling. And then that just kind of kept unfolding.
More than a feeling.
Exactly. Boston with the spaceship on the cover. Exactly. So it was more than a feeling. It was something ancient, I would say. And so, I just kept sitting with that for a while. Like, where is this coming from? Why is this coming up? And the way I was looking at it was, what is there inside of me that needs to heal, that thinks I need to look for something in a man outside of myself? Like, this was the kind of stuff I was playing with to try to control it. Because you can sometimes this like.
So you thought it was like a faulty part of your system, and you needed to hack it, as opposed to maybe an upgrade itself.
Exactly, because it didn't fit the mold. I wasn't ready to surrender to this part of the story. I'd surrendered to all the rest, but this was like, I couldn't break apart this whole thing that I just affected, right? Like, and so, yeah, and this is what started to teach me that the feeling is the knowing. you know, and to trust the knowing and to trust the feeling. But so it was over the course of, I started Googling things like, you know, having feelings for someone you've never had before, like you've known them forever, that kind of stuff. And that's when twin flame stuff came up. And I was like, okay, that seems a little dramatic for me. Just to be really honest, I'd read some of the stories and I was like, I don't even play like that in my current relationship. Like, I'm not really looking, I don't have any lessons to learn in another relationship. Like, why is this coming up for me? What is this?
Whenever I read Twin Flame, because I'm in a Twin Flame relationship now, ironically, with my fiance, and same thing. I was not on board. I didn't even care about it. In fact, I was kind of negative / pessimistic. I was like, this seems like hyper romantic Stockholm syndrome. Like all the stories I hear seem like, you know, unrequited love gone wrong, and then people are just like saying, but they'll come back, they're runners and all this kind of stuff. I'm just like, what? This is like unhealthy, weird spiritual toxicity. But when you start having it happen, it's like how you're saying, it's like, I mean, I'm having Kundalini activations and all sorts of weird shit. I'm like, who is this person? So I understand what you mean totally, where it's just like signing up for something you never thought it defies logic, and it defies maybe even expectation in a sense. Like, this isn't like hyper romance, like Ken and Barbie going off in the sunset necessarily. Hopefully it works out, you know, ultimately. But the point is, like, I think not to interrupt you, like, do you think everybody has a twin? Do you think this is only some people do this? How do you even feel about that? Not to go off on too much of a rabbit hole, but just quick caveat.
No, that's a good question. I don't know how I feel about that, because, you know, what I really think the twin idea really is getting to a point in your consciousness where you understand that you're the creator of it all and that you're creating reflections. And so eventually you get to the point where you stop creating toxic reflections and you create reflections of pure love, because you're in love with you know who you are, you understand yourself, you love yourself. So you're not attracting a partner, because we're just here learning and playing through relationships. You're not attracting a partner that needs to run and chase or anything like that. You know what I mean? Like, you're solid inside and you attract something that's also solid inside. And so I think that's available to anybody that wants to play in that consciousness. But there's a lot of old emotion and attachment, kind of what I was talking about earlier, letting go of the resentment and the forgiveness and the trauma. And I don't want to ever disrespect, you know, anybody's stories of what's happened to them in the past. But if we hold on to them, we can't play in these games. If we hold on to those stories and we're still identified by what's happened to us in our past, we can't really play in creating the new, because we still are identified with this old version of ourselves. And so, yeah, I think it's available to anyone. And it doesn't necessarily have to even be called a twin, but that's just one way of calling it, where we bring in that match because we've solidified ourselves inside. And so I think I was doing that without really realizing it. I was balancing the masculine and the feminine. I do think that has something to do with it, kind of just becoming more aware of the energetics of yourself and just becoming a master of your emotions and your body and the chemicals and all of that stuff. But I didn't realize that this kind of stuff could happen, you know? And then I look at it and I'm like, you know what? Astrologically, I have 5 planets, all Scorpio in my 9th house. And it's all about, now that I know about astrology, I didn't really know it then. It all just kind of happened. And then I realized how congruent it was. But, you know, the 9th house is about foreign travel. My Venus is there, my Mercury, Venus, Sun, Jupiter. I can't remember what else. Like, they're all there. And so even finding foreign love is in my 9th house. And it's in that. And then the death and the rebirth that I have in my Libra, in my 8th house, you know, my Saturn.
Dang, that's a ratchet
Pluto,
chart.
like,
I'm like, oh shit, you're gonna transform pretty heavily in relationships and abroad, it seems.
Yeah, exactly. So now looking back, I'm like, wow, I really just came into alignment with my chart. You know, it was like, I started to realize the chart was telling the story. And I kind of look at astrology and gene keys and all of that as our karma, right? Like, it's the decisions of what we wanted to be before we got here that we're kind of tied to in a way, but we eventually master that blueprint and then we transcend that and we're just creating and co-creating, and kind of, we're not cursed or limited by a chart, especially in human design. Sometimes I feel like there can be some attachment to, like, oh, well, I've got this open and I don't have this, and so I'm doomed. This is wrong with me. Exactly, like that kind of stuff. I'm like, I don't play it like that, because why would I doom myself, right? So so that's what really started bringing me into astrology, gene keys, and human design, because I was like,
Googling
wow,
twin
it's
flames
really
led to charts, basically.
all of it. Well, what happened, Googling twin flames, first of all, led me to those stories, and I was like, no. Then it led me through love bite stories, and it was talking about reptilians and tricking.
I've never
and
heard
I was
of
like,
that. Like vampiric kind of like energetic harnessing?
yeah. So when I found that, I was like, is that what this shit is? What's happening to me? Because I couldn't understand why I couldn't control this raging feeling that was coming up in my body, right? So then I was like, is he messing with me? Like, what is this? And I'd never even heard of a reptilian before, right? But it put me in this little paranoia. And so like, I had to go through all these stages, because it kind of introduced me to that dimension of reality where people think in these fearful ways. I'm not saying it like this is it's just a dimension of reality where we look at things where there's an opposite of us or something to fear. Like, I don't see anything as outside of us. But at that moment, I was looking at that story like, could this be it? And then eventually I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening.
There you
And that's exactly, it's totally tied to it. So I didn't know what that was, right? I'd never heard of that. So what I enjoy about my story is that I think sometimes now people are really caught up in the twin flame story and they are chasing it, or
Well, they pursue it, yeah, like an ideal. And it's like, I don't know if, just like not everybody's signed up to be a psychonaut, like with psychedelics, and not everybody's signed up to be, I don't know, religious or something like that. It's like not everybody's maybe signed up. It's an option on the table, but I don't know if everybody's permission slips are like geared to that. And it's just funny because it goes to show that even within spiritually waking up and stuff, like that doesn't mean like the polarity and the fear and the projection still exists even at levels there. I mean, Raphael's always giving me stuff. I mean, my fiance is an RH negative. I think Raphael is. So the whole like reptilians equal bad necessarily thing turns into a drama, a story on another level. Instead of being like Democrats and Republicans, it's like Pleiadians and reptilians, and it's like it perpetuates a different kinds of fracturing, and it's like it's all one big trip. And we all chose different things to experience because that's how stories get told. We're telling a big story with each other.
Exactly. It's so fun when you really start to realize that, and you don't take anything serious anymore. And, I laugh looking back at that. And I mean, that was such a small glimpse of my life, because I would say right after that, I felt like I'd pretty much learned. Well, I think honestly, part of the mutation, if I were to say that there is such a thing as a mutation, is that we transcend the adrenals and fear in the body and those fear chemicals being released. And I think there's something there. I don't know the scientific behind it, but I started to observe myself not having fear in pretty much any situation, even little stuff, right? Like, I don't know, we're in our house in the jungle in the middle of the night, and there's this loud noise and animals fighting, and my whole family's like freaked out, their hearts beating and racing, and they're like, oh my God, what is that? And
what kind of animals?
Who knows?
Like,
okay. I don't even,
I was like,
but
gorillas?
There's all kinds of, no, but if you've heard a howler monkey, they're actually, they can be kind of barbaric. They sound Sasquatchy, echoing through the forest. But I observed myself that my nervous system wasn't really reacting to things. It wasn't getting overly done. It wasn't pulsing with that fear stuff or that adrenaline stuff anymore. And I feel like I don't.
An element to mushroom trips in that valley or ayahuasca or anything. It's like, oh my God, there's howler monkeys.
Oh my God, I'm sure that would bring in some. I mean, it's so deep, and they can come at any time. So in the middle of the night or 5 a.m. or whatever, but their sound is so intense. It really is Sasquatch in the forest. So, so the Kundalini thing happened, and I literally started Googling, like, feels like an orgasm for 2 weeks. And Kundalini came up, because that's what I was feeling, this constant, all day, every day, not initiated by anything, orgasmic energy going through my body that didn't stop. And so I started Googling, well, what is this? So first the twin flame thing, then the Kundalini thing. Then I'd met a woman in my neighborhood, and she actually wanted to look at my daughter's chart because she felt like she wasn't from this world, and so she said, hey, come on over, we'll look at her stuff. And then that's how I got into human design. She pulled my chart for me. Looking back, I paid like $300 for a session for an hour, and I realized she pulled the chart online for free. So right when I realized that, I mean, not that the session wasn't nice, it was so helpful, but I realized I went home after that and I just started cracking the code on this stuff. And then that's how it led me to the gene keys. And what was interesting about the gene keys is one of these. First of all, I found out that the guy that Eduardo is his name, was who barely spoke English at the time, and even now we just kind of have our limited own language, Spanglish. But we've been together a little over a year now. But anyways, he and I shared the same main 4 codes. So our sun and earth, our unconscious and our conscious design, if you're looking at human design, or your activation sequence, the main 4 codes that are on the outer edge, or your golden path, our numbers were the same, but reversed each other. So they were mirroring each other like a true mirror, like a twin, like the concept of a twin. And so that was a little interesting to me. Like that felt like a sign, but I was still going through a big death at this point. Like I couldn't make this decision, even though I knew I was feeling these deep feelings. A lot more synchronicities had to happen before I was able to really leave it all behind, because I did leave it all behind, but that old life. But the gene keys came in, and I looked up this one specific code that was in this one specific sphere, the 29 in my radiant sphere. And the radiant sphere is about what keeps you healthy. And it was talking about saying yes to the things that come to you in your life, and listening to your body, and listening to your feelings, and trusting. And then it talks about, and each of the gene keys, has a shadow, a gift, and acidic frequency. So there's a variation of frequency between every code. So I was studying this, but what was interesting is in the gift frequency, it said something like, and this is where it started feeling like a Twilight Zone or something. It said, if you find yourself feeling attraction to another person at the end of a 7-year cycle, it's either going to be time to work on your current relationship and improving it, or it's going to be and extend that, or it's going to be time to start something new for the evolution of your soul or something like that. And so here I was at 14 years with my husband, so 2 7-year cycles, and I was having an attraction for another man who also had the same code as me. And I'm like, okay, this is a little crazy. I don't think I would have ever gone down this path or believed in this stuff as deeply if it didn't happen like that, where I was like, wow, there's some synchronistic shit happening.
Shit lines
between...
up. I mean, it seems like it's not just so much like a, like you're saying, it's not just like a compulsion to have a better life in a way. It seemed like the karmic relationship was ending and prepared you and got you to the place you need to be for this to, happen, obviously, at some level. Fascinating. And also what you were kind of saying about the adrenals earlier in development, that's one of the gene key points, and I'm not sure about human design because I haven't gotten into it, but they're kind of like yin and yang to each other. Human design being a little more masculine, logical, and gene keys being a little more feminine and kind of dreamy. I don't even know how to put it, but it's about our genes, our DNA, like evolving like as a species. And so this does have quite a bit to do with evolution. It's funny because it's taking all the magic of woo, because I tend to be very new age and open to yes, we're in a dream and all this kind of stuff. But it's there's still mechanics going on. There's still program, like algorithms and programs and dynamics that have causality and logic. And, it's not just oh, there's a pink dinosaur and now I'm a crystal shard and now I'm a rainbow. And it's not quite like that. It's not that loose. There's, confines to it and stuff. I didn't mean to cut you off though.
No, it's beautiful. I think we're all kind of, and depending on how we're coded, we look at it all differently. We all have different perspectives into the game. Some of us require, because of our design, a little more logic. Some of us are a little more abstract in our process or understanding. And that's why I like putting these two systems together, because it is right. The human design's more mechanic and structure. And, but I also feel like can be a little limited at times. And then the gene keys bring in the energetic flow. They bring in that true, well, there are no limits when you're playing with energy. Structure, there can be limit, depending on how you're looking at structure, but we're kind of playing with matter, and we're playing with the energy that fills the matter. So that's where I started to really shift my perspective into energy, frequency creating reality. Started instead, looking at everything outside, going inside, playing inside, kind of assigning, frequency to emotions, feelings, behaviors, and things like that. Just seeing patterns. And then, even now I'd say I pretty much feel and see everything on more of an energetic level. Any person I meet, or feel, I should say, any person I feel. because now we're reading auric fields, you know, without really realizing it. It's like we're reading the energy of people. I can kind of understand their love and their percentage of love and fear, maybe their masculine and feminine, their wounds and trauma. Like I can feel the energy of what they still carry or what they don't. I used to think it was judgment, but now I understand it's actually a part of the mutation. It's a part of the solar plexus shift. And we've got to shift out of the logical mind in order to really embody this type of knowing and understanding and to deeply trust it. And so what I'm feeling like now, you know, with human design, they kind of talk about this 2027 being the year. But what I'm thinking is it's happening right now, kind of like a quantum leap or a timeline jump. I mean, it's exactly 7 years from 2027. I started feeling like at the beginning of this year, this mutation was happening heavily, at least amongst individuals that were starting
And the astrology
to bring
for the fucking Jupiter, Capricorn, Saturn and Pluto and Capricorn conjunction. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on right now, you know? So it's just like, holy tits. I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, 7-year cycles. And we've had some people who are into gene keys and stuff, and they've been saying, yeah, we're going from the ajna to the solar plexus. This is the next evolution in our species awareness patterning, and to just kind of enjoy the ride. But it doesn't mean, you know, it's like there's going to be some turbulence. And I guess another 7 years kind of, but keep going with what you're saying about quantum shifting.
Yeah, well, I just feel like what I was feeling at the beginning of this year is I started really getting into the codes and every week there's a different code that's kind of under the sun or in transit, right? So I started playing with that a little more and following it back to the I Ching, which is really what created all of this. All of these codes come first and foremost from the I Ching, and then I feel like the I Ching was coded specifically for certain masters that were able to understand the stuff and decode it, but it wasn't meant for everybody to understand because it can still be a little more complex. And then you bring it in a human design, and it was like another layer to kind of bring in a new awakening or a new audience of people that comprehended things from the logical. And then the gene keys is like an expansion of that. So we're bringing in these new languages that's bringing us into the awareness of this information that's kind of always been running behind the scenes. These codes have been running around this wheel every single year since we can understand, thousands of years ago, according to this, right? And who knows, right? I'm never so certain about any one thing, but this is the way that I started to look at it. So I started to follow the codes, and at the beginning of the year, I started to see, okay, first of all, I was about to go to a big music festival here in Costa Rica called Envision, which you guys would love, and anybody listening would love. But I felt like at that time I was kind of getting a vision of the mutation starts now. It starts with all of these people that are right here on this land, that are right next to this ocean, that are like hearts wide open, that are like so waking up right now. And
it's like Rainbow Warrior prophecy stuff.
I was feeling it happen. And that's when I was feeling that whole music festival was God merging with man, with the quantum, like just this trinitized, I don't know, combination, mutation of energies that was getting kicked off right now as we were there, like a history being made. And then the COVID thing happened, and a lot of those people ended up getting stuck here, which is not by surprise, right? Because, you know, the way I see it.
One of our friends who's been on the podcast, Samuel Barnes, he's stuck there, I think. I don't know if stuck is a strong word, but he's there.
Well,
still.
Exactly. It's the best place to be anyways. Like
that's what he's saying.
Exactly, it is. So exactly, stuck might not be the word, but you start to really understand the dynamics of people as frequency holders, moving to different places, anchoring frequencies, awareness, consciousness, auric fields, energy in certain places, and then bringing it to other places, and the strategic pieces of all of that. Like I've really started to notice patterns of how I might get on a call and connect with someone, and there's almost a person on every continent. Like, what are we really doing? We're not just talking. We are anchoring frequencies and bringing my consciousness to your consciousness. We're merging our consciousness, and we're activating fields, right? We're activating locations is kind of how I've started to see it. And so these codes, that's the deeper awareness that I started getting into with gene keys and human design. Like, I can't tell you everything about the gene keys and human design in the way that the person just getting started might, okay, start with this activation sequence and follow it here. I think there's a quantum language to this too, where you come to it and you digest this stuff in a different way, and you start really seeing code, understanding code. It puts context to why people meet and how they come together. You start to see patterns. So that's the part I'm really interested in, is that as I start to observe that 3 people could call me in one day that I haven't talked to in years, and why'd they call me, right? Who knows? Each one of them had a bad day and they thought they'd call their one friend, right? Like, I don't do any kind of coaching work necessarily. These are just friends. And that I would say, hey, could I pull your gene keys chart? And that two or three of them, they had the same main 4 codes, and they all called me on that day. And so you start to see these interesting patterns of what these codes, the energy lines behind the numbers, you know, behind why people might be attracted to each other or come together with each other. You start to see these fractals come together through the info. So, you know, at first, the information that came through about the relationship stuff made me really solid in the info. I'd wake up every night after I put kids to bed and just consume this stuff for 3 to 4 hours a night. And
Scorpio shit, obsessions. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I gotta eat it all.
Well,
Especially
and
with
that's
ninth
my-
house, you know,
Exactly.
it's like spirituality, like truth.
So, and five planets there, all I wanted to do was go deep. And that's all I've been doing ever since. Like, my days look like me sitting on the ground with books all around me, drawing codon rings and DNA and amino acids and physiology. And I've never been into science and biology stuff necessarily, but see, the codes are connecting the spirituality with the physical, because each code is connected to physiology and an amino acid structure. So there's something, and I don't know all the answers to exactly how that works. I kind of feel like I'm ready almost to talk to someone that's more into the quantum biology stuff and be like, hey, this is what I know from my perspective, because I don't think so scientific. Like, how can we put this together? Because there's also a connection with the codon rings. There's 22 codon rings. They're connected to the 22 major arcanas.
Damn.
And so I don't know. And so I didn't know this stuff, right, before, but when I put that together and I started really thinking in codon rings, which is patterns of codes together that create chemical formations, I stopped looking at this stuff ever as like my individual codes and studying about myself, because I'd kind of already done that stuff. So now I was looking at it from collective perspectives, how codes come together, be doing energetically or chemically when codes come together on calls like this, or in person, or on the same land, you know, like while we were in Vision or something like that. So I started to see those types of patterns. And so there's something with the tarot, and I didn't know that, I guess, the 22 major arcana hold this, like, this esoteric, the mysteries that couldn't be written, so that people couldn't find the deep mysteries of course, this is all making me excited because this is my Scorpio philosophy stuff. And I'm like, esoteric secrets and knowledge, and like, what are the hidden secrets, you know? And so now I'm seeing that the tarot is connected to the gene keys too. It's all connected, right? And
Right.
So how far down the rabbit hole do you really want to go? But yeah, that's what I've been playing with.
Let's put it that way. I'm all about it. So it's like, it's funny because I hadn't heard the codon ring thing, but now that you say that, no, duh, Jim, 22 codon rings, 22 major arcana. And it's funny because you do it like a lot like me. I have a feeling we're more similar than not, because you've said a few words as I was thinking them. I'm not saying we're like psychically connected, but it's like we'll probably have a lot more resonance than I would think. And you're approaching it, I mean, I'm a double Gemini, right? Like a 11th house double Gemini. So it's like a student of life, curiosity kind of being the thing that's leading you. You know, you smell the bread, you know, if you walk, I mean, I don't know if you've been to like Europe or anything, but they've got these things in France called fromageries, which are like cheese shops. And it's like you can smell that shit a few blocks away. It's pretty gross. I mean, I used to love cheese. I'm vegan now, but the point is, like, it smells like, you know, blue cheese, basically, like rank. But you start sniffing out and you can figure it out and you follow your nose. I think you're doing that with a lot of this stuff. And I have no qualms particularly against, I mean, for a long time, people have been going to like the conservatory and learning the scales and stuff. And it's like, we're jazz musicians with this. It's like we're hearing it by ear and we hear the tune, and we're gifted enough with the whatever we've got in our charts and stuff to be able to kind of grok it quickly and then adapt and play. So I don't think, I mean, on the one hand, we should respect where it comes from in a way, but we're not beholden to it, if that makes sense. I think that's where real genius lies, and that's why movements shift, zeitgeists and like old guard, new guard kind of stuff. I think there's a whole new guard coming in. It takes a little time, and there's transitional phases, kind of like you were saying. This lady charged me $300 for shit I could have gotten for free. I'm kind of at a point like I'm charging for readings and stuff, and I didn't really want to do that, and I still don't want to do it for much. It's still very, very reasonable. But even that whole economic, reality where it's like we're going from a place of like everyone crush skulls and make as much money, and like you were doing before, to like, hey, what do I really need versus how can I be of service, and how did this come together at some point for my vision of career, or offering, or however you want to put that. I'm kind of rambling. I tend to do that, but no, bottom line, it sounds like you're turning on to the mystery in a very particular way, which I myself appreciate. Where it's like, I don't know. I mean, imagine like the locals of, somebody 5-10 miles away from that Envision Festival hearing the sounds wafting, right? Or they're like, what's that? And it's like, maybe they're not, concert promoters or the headlining band, but like they get in on it at an energetic level from the outside in. And I think that's, self-initiation's a big deal. I think that's kind of, we've had Freemasons on, Master Masons, and all these kind of cool, heady people. And I'm not slighting any of them, but it seems like a lot of people that are in the Team Rabbit Hole wave, and just a lot of people in the zeitgeist now who are choosing to, are self-initiating essentially, and we're kind of all doing it together in another way too, in a quantum way. But I totally hear and resonate with what you're saying in terms of the fractal kind of starting in a place, and it's weaving out, and the dream is kind of increasing, and we're all holding different codes in different places. And it's like a network. We're building networks of consciousness. Not that it was bad before, but it's upgrading, and that takes, I guess, as long or as short as we would like. Rafa, you've been kind of quiet, so I'm kind of curious as to what we're talking about, like any kind of 2 cents you could throw our way, or what's resonating with you or not, etc.
Well, as always, Jim, I'd ask you to be
articulate
slightly more specific in your questioning.
It sounds like I don't know if she's into Bashar. Raphael kind of turned me on to Bashar and Star Seeds. Daryl Anka channels an entity named Bashar. And we're getting, like, that's why we're pulling Galactic Heritage cards. It sounds like we're really at the beginning of the dawning of the Age of Aquarius in a very kind of a fun way. I didn't know if, whether 2027 means something to Bashar, or how you're looking at, collectives maybe in places like Costa Rica being the change, and then it flooding from out there, as opposed to like running around and being truthers and telling people they're all sheeple, or, that kind of stuff.
Well, as I may have mentioned, 2027 in Bashar's terminology is called the contact fulcrum, where supposedly, another great, let's say, track line decision is being made in that year. However, of course, we know by now everything is here and now anyways. And in terms of who, quote unquote, gets stuck where, it's all a matter of resonance. I'm not, I trust that everyone, no matter where they are in this now, are in the perfect place at the perfect time. And just before, of course, on Okitalk, we have many shows in German, and just in the show before, with all the turbulence and so on, we had a comment of a woman that said, well, she had been traveling the world, and now she's back in Germany and really feels that this is, her place to be acting and doing and being active or whatever, or informing individuals. So I can just say, there's no accidents, and everyone synchronistically is where they're supposed to be. And as Alisha shared, if you're like in alignment with yourself, then anyhow, you have all the energy to proceed. And so I don't necessarily would say that, one path is better than another or anything like that. It's just about trusting the process. And I guess in the human design sense, how would they say, living through your authority, something like that?
Speaking of which, Alisha, I don't know if you can multitask or if you even care. I just sent you my and Raphael's gene key profiles in human design, if there was anything that hit you, or you thought about the alchemy of this conversation in particular, etc. But I can't speak very much on the human design particularly right now, personally, just because I literally just finished the introduction section of the book or whatever with my fiance right before we did this call. So I mean, I'm in gear for this. It seems like just boot camp and right timing, kind of like Harry getting an owl. It's like, come to Hogwarts. It's like, all right, time's now. I guess I've been chilling under the stairs for a hot minute. Now it's time to go.
I'm totally looking at charts right now. The first thing I notice is, I think it's Raphael's chart has the 2946 channel, which I feel like is a highly whether you relate to this or not, is another thing, but a highly sexual and, well, it's a highly tantric channel. But I would say, and sexual maybe isn't even the word, pure life force energy is the word. And it powers you from your sacral to your, what's the yellow diamond? I don't know, the heart. And
4 to 6 is there, but 29 you said? Where would you see that?
Yes.
I was
Yeah,
going to say, mine is the one without the red line. His has the red line at the top.
Yep. So you still have the 29, which this is my favorite code. This is the one
Right.
it's well, the 29 and the 30 were the ones that were so synchronistic for me. They were in I Ching, you know, the hexagrams, it was water over water, fire over fire. So it was water and fire coming together, which is also interesting because I'm so water and then my partner is Leo and we're water fire. But, anyways, the synchronicities in those codes in our charts, but we both have that 2946 channel, and it's just been, it's pure high energy that I'm like, okay, maybe we experience this just because we're aligned and we're doing our work, you know, and in a way, like I'm at the point where I feel like our work is just bringing in high frequency to the planet through our love, through
Like
our
as a
high
portal
frequency.
or something.
Yeah. Like anchoring it in, bringing it through, understanding that we're capable of holding these frequencies. And that's really what the mutation is about. The mutation is about our cells and our DNA directly changing so that they can hold higher frequencies, or else it would fry the machine. And so that's where that 2027 comes in, because not everybody's body clearly is ready for that, or their consciousness is ready to embody those high frequencies yet. They've probably got to go through what I just went through for 7 years. That's what they're starting to go through right now. That's really, I've been waiting, you know, I knew for the last year or so, okay, there's going to be some spontaneous awakening. What's it going to look like? I didn't know it would look like this, but that's really what this whole thing is about, right? It's bringing in awakening. It's bringing in awareness. It's shaking shit up. We're seeing the shadows, the collective shadows being played out, the collective fears being played out. And they have to come out in order for us to start to embody these higher frequencies. And in order for us to kind of catch up with, if you want to call it the ascension, these higher frequencies of Earth that are happening, in order to embody them, we got to let go of the old stuff. So, and that's why I think Gene Keys is starting to become more popular too, because I feel like it's exploded since I found it in October of last year. I was looking for people with relevant stories with these codes, and I couldn't find them because they hadn't really come out yet. They hadn't really happened yet. We're kind of the initiators of these processes, even though these codes have been out for a long time, but there's a new context being put to the codes, kind of what you were talking about in the changing of the guards. And, you know, the last will be first and the first will be last and that kind of thing. It's like, we're kind of, but there's like this deep understanding that's coming in with this language. We're just ready to receive. And so I would say most people that start opening this book that have these quantum minds, I don't even know that it has anything to do with charts. You know, it's more, it's time and it's timing in a non-time world. It's probably that we've transcended time in some ways, transcended duality in some ways, which I know a lot of people fight and swear that we can't do. But I feel like we can.
Like in the Matrix when they pop out in the third Matrix and see the sun. They dip back down, but it's like, I think everybody's turning onto this kind of shit has at least at one point had a moment of unity, like that we just forget about it.
Yeah, that's the multidimensional aspects of ourself, right? That we can kind of play in all these worlds, and none of them are right or wrong or better than another. We just go play in the ones that we want to, that feel good. And, you know, I like to play in the ones that feel really good. I like to play in those ecstatic states. That's what the 46 is about, with the love of the body, and the acidic frequency. The shadow frequency is seriousness. And then the acidic frequency is ecstasy. And,
which I think is funny because Raphael, he's not clearly not against psychedelics and having fun and his highest excitement. And like, this fits right into that. I'm like, for me, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's like, I'm having to like trip a lot less now. I'm going to do like once a year, and I'm not smoking weed, and I used to grow weed and stuff like that. Whereas Raphael doesn't seem to be like deviating from the path of like carnal joy. And when I saw that, when it was like his purpose is ecstasy, I was like, of course, like he's here to have a good time in a lot of ways.
Well, exactly. You know, I've been working through that a lot in my current relationship, because even around some of these ideas of twin flames, and especially in the light worker community and some of the new age stuff, and Tantra really teaches like, I don't know. Sometimes it can be like these holy ways of like, okay, no penetration, or like we're just going to meditate or hold our hands. I'm not saying those things aren't powerful, not at all.
They
But
have
I
their
am
place.
saying, but they have their place. But like, listen to your body. If you have energy to go there and that's where you want to go play, like, where are the rules at here? And, you know, I have to work with Eduardo a little bit on this because so when I met Eduardo, he practices the Tao. He's been in the Tao. They say it's not a religion, but I beg to differ with some of the things that I hear. But he's not.
So
really...
he's into Star Wars / The Big Lebowski pretty hard. I'm kidding.
No, he's such an Eduardo is the most interesting person in the world. It's like he doesn't exist in the world. He doesn't have a bank account. He doesn't wear shoes. He's like in a different world most of the time. He's psychedelic without being psychedelic. Like I remember the first time I smoked with him. Well, first of all, he was celibate for 7 years when I met him. So I was
Damn,
like, oh
another
my,
cycle.
I know, a beautiful one for me. And really had learned a lot about semen retention and stuff like that, more from a spiritual perspective. But honestly, it's like he was preparing his body for our union, because now I'm like, God, once you met me, you started smoking, you started making love. Like I'm a bad influence on you. But this is the 2946 channel activated, in my personal opinion. Like maybe not everybody from human design would say that that's what it means or looks like, but that's what it looks like and feels like for us and we both happen to have it. So it's like even double fire.
Sounds like you have some howler monkeys on the premises.
That's actually my 4-year-old.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I know.
But good Lord.
I know, he sounds like he's having a party out there. So, you know, yeah, so right away that channel popped out at me. I'm going to go back and look at some other stuff, and if you all have some other questions.
In the meantime, what I'd like to reinforce is, the idea you mentioned about holding a frequency. I don't know how much I've shared about it explicitly on the podcast, but I've also had, let's say, similar revelations, both in a sense of cognition and also in a sense of relating it specifically to so-called, psychedelic music festivals. Even here, of course, it's depending on the festival, of course. Many individuals have their own trips, especially on the larger ones, but there are, there's a grander synchronicity available and a wider frequency range. I believe one of our first shows actually was about so-called transformative festivals. And then even when we speak of things like looking at the chart, it says ecstasy, it says intoxication, bliss, and so on. Just as you pointed out, and it fits right in perfectly. There's a whole, different approach to the entire idea. Once you're even aware of levels such as Tantra, once you're even aware of the idea of your own emotional frequency, actually, creating your reality. And, whilst we may be doing many, many things in the world, in a sense, at least to me, it is blatantly obvious that it really only merely is about maintaining your own frequency, whatever this means to you, and depending on the polarization that you're choosing. And that, that is all there is, because if it really is true that your state of being creates your reality, then again, what else could be more important than maintaining that frequency on the highest possible level within the polarization you chose? And if that's positive, then that will be closer and closer to unconditional love, closer and closer to bliss. And even as you explained yourself in terms of having weird feelings and so on, and you have a partner who's into Taoism, I would agree there's dogmatic approaches there as well, just like with Gnosticism and so on, that I don't necessarily jive with. But there's many amazing tools and perspectives right there. And then you can even literally also in a bodily sense feel there is more energy coursing through you, or at least you have the opportunity anytime to activate energetic circuits within your body that any human has. It maybe takes, a tiny bit of practice or whatever, but anyone going into this for a few weeks, doing these visualization exercises and, muscle exercises, whatever else, there's many simple methods to go into it. One book I can recommend is Taoist Yoga and Sexual Energy by Eric Judlove, who was one of the first master students by Mantak Chia. So all I can say is it's a whole new world, and it's a different dimension basically. And in the end, again, I would agree, it's just about, knowing who you are, and then deconstructing all the layers, all the obstructions, all the negative emotions and belief systems, And then you can realize more and more, anyhow, you create the reality you desire, and you can stick to that frequency, and you can have this experience and process, just as you described, of truly in this way incarnating heaven on earth.
Well, just to really quickly kind of say, it's funny because I think something that human design in the intro made me very aware of. On the one hand, you like what Raphael was saying when he's like, you create a reality and stuff. For some reason, I always thought like that just got, it didn't have any form to it in some way. And now I'm starting to realize we have designs and we've chosen these designs, and in order to fully function at the highest degrees, like, you know, the city level or whatever, honoring and understanding those designs in such a way that we let go of all the projections from others and all the, you know, this is what you need, this is what you need. People try to do that out of, like, I guess maybe at best compassion, at worst, like, you know, dogmatic kind of projectionism or whatever. But like, we need to kind of get, like he's saying, still in ourselves. And when we know, I mean, this is kind of a both and, but it's like you're free to do anything, but you still have like a design in a sense. Like, you're still going to function well. Like a whale can do whatever it wants, but it's probably better in the ocean than like on the beach or whatever.
Right. And just
So,
briefly
yeah,
here
go ahead.
to mention as a reference, anyone interested in understanding more of the linkages, check out Bruce Lipton, Biology of Belief. He's explaining genetics and epigenetics, stem cell research. I think this highly relates to this topic. And as far as I understood human design, there's some saying also along the lines of you get introduced to this and 7 years later you're through your transformational process. So that's also kind of embedded in human design. And with gene keys, the way I understand it is you kind of have your particular template. And again, I don't see it as dogmatic, just as insofar as I had checked out these systems, they just resonate highly. And if I can understand that me as a higher self chose my birth date and so on, then of course I'm going to give myself the manual. But that's at least my perspective, you know, in terms of empowerment. However, it is also mentioned that, of course, everyone contains all of these codes. And
Correct.
we can access all of them. This is just like, you know, giving you a push, like a first idea, or start here. This is probably what's most resonant with you. And at least to me, as I had mentioned, I also have a very detailed human design analysis made by a friend. And every time I read through this, I'm like, oh, everything again makes total sense, and all the peculiarities and strangeness is perfectly explained. And it also allows each and every one to be more comfortable in their quote unquote weirdness, because there is no normality in that sense anyhow. That's merely a construct. And it can really assist in the process that human design talks about, which is individuation. And individuation within the idea of densities and development of consciousness. And the alchemical process is the third density solar plexus task, actually. So that's only the third density task, but it's absolutely required, rather than collectivism, you know, individuation, knowing who you really are, to then ascend, quote unquote, to the fourth density, which then again is the idea in the alchemical process of conjunction. But individuation comes first.
Exactly. You guys are nailing it. That's what I started to find out through this stuff, is I was like, if I just align with who I am and I be myself, and I'm myself, you know, I learned a few things about my design that were like, oh, I'm a hermit. I'm meant to have alone time. I never had alone time. I started giving myself alone time. That's when the downloads started coming. You know, I'd always been so busy being a mom and like all the other roles that I hadn't really honored that. When I started being myself, my frequency started, what I would say, quantum leaping, because I went from one state of existence to this whole other world. And I think other people are experiencing this as well. And that's how we can have these collective quantum leaps, because it's like the 2 becomes the 10. And then these people that start to understand this stuff, we all get together and we have these codes that we're activating within each other. And again, we do have all the codes. So it's like you come here initially for your individual blueprint. And what I like to say, it's like your body is your starship. Your codes are kind of the codes, and you come in and you start to understand those. And you start to pay attention to the turbulence outside of you, and you use this conscious code book or this map to really help you align with yourself. And when you do that, it's like a rocket ship exploding into these higher frequencies that you couldn't get through before. You got to let go of all the other stuff. And I would say, you know, human design talks about the 7-year deconditioning, but I mean, I'm not saying I've got it all figured out, but I don't think it has to take 7 years. That's only if we still think in linear time. But at some point when you start playing in these worlds, you don't think in linear time anymore, like at all, ever, unless you really have to, unless you have a life that requires that. But eventually, even because if your consciousness doesn't live in time, your reality won't look like that either. I never need to know what day it is or what time it is. Very rare. You know, I knew what time this was today, but other than that, it's pretty rare I would look at a calendar or understand anything like that. And so when you step beyond those things, healing takes place instantaneously. It doesn't, you know, even the idea that healing takes a long time. It takes a long time to heal because something was so drastic or terrible that happened. That's just us putting time limitations on things. So how do we get more into that quantum way of thinking? And then with these codes, and especially around sexuality, this was a big one for me, because now looking back, I'm being reminded, and I know that as I'm being reminded, I'm being shown that I'm busting through these codes for the collective. I can go back and think of the times that I was going to church and youth group and I might feel attracted to a boy and want to play or something, and I wouldn't do that because that was bad, right? Like all of the bad things, quote unquote, around sexuality, especially in America, I feel like it's more restricted than in other countries. I feel like other cultures are a little more free about this, but there's just always been so much fear around sexuality. And it explains a lot of the underground sexual stuff that's happening right now. Is that sexual energy and the talking about sex and the being open about it hasn't really happened. It's still a little bit taboo in some ways. And so,
and also, like in a psychoanalytic way, if we repress sexuality, it comes out in neuroses in other ways. So we have, like, you know, fascism on the rise in America, maybe because people just aren't having fun in a healthy way.
Right. So, you know, all of these things around sexuality, there's a big, in a way, it's like there's a collective shift of awareness that has to happen in that sacral area. I feel like came here, when I came to Costa Rica, I wasn't so connected to my sexual energy. I love my husband. We had great chemistry together, but that's not what we were doing, because we were just like being parents. We'd really fallen into that role, and we were best friends. We would stay up and laugh and joke and whatever, but we weren't really getting intimate because we still carried like regular life stress stuff. And so Eduardo and I would say, I have to get comfortable sharing this because it's just a part of the reality. We probably make love 3 to 4 hours every single day, which is like, I don't think that's what is up. And it's like, it's not normal. And looking back in my life, I think you know, people would say like, oh, you're a Scorpio, like you're so sexual. And I was like, not really.
In my house, let's be real.
I know. I mean, yes. So people would tell me that and be like, oh, you're such a sexual person. I'm like, not really. You know, like I am definitely.
Just took the right key, you know, to open the lock or whatever.
Yes. And I tuned into a totally new frequency, right? I tuned out of a frequency that wasn't in alignment with myself. I tuned out of that. The tools came in so that I could start to put the pieces together. And it was very easy for me. You know, this work can be very quick if you're able to let go of shadows. That's all shadow work really is. And especially what's cool about gene keys is when you kind of find out some of this stuff was like programmed in your DNA and it's ancestral. It's not so much even your individual stuff. Let it go. Like rewrite the program. You found a virus on the computer, you remove the virus. It's slowing you down, right? So, my howler monkey's coming after me again. So those were the things I started to kind of put together from this was there are no rules here. You know, that's what's brought me to where I'm at right now. And even like having Eduardo kind of work through his Taoist beliefs and practices, it's like the bigger picture is that there are no rules. It's really about being free, having fun, connecting with your body, listening to your body and following desire. We've actually been taught, and desire isn't always sexual, but we've been taught that desire could lead us down the wrong road or tempt us or something like that. And I kind of feel like if I didn't follow that desire, and that was part of the 30 code, which Raphael, I see you have the 29 and 30 in your unconscious and your conscious. So it's about, desire is a bit. And what I've learned is desire is actually leading us exactly where we should go. It's magnetically attracting us to those places. Whereas we've had these judgments of like desire is bad. And so we don't follow it or we try to get rid of it. That's what I tried to do for the beginning of this until I knew what I needed to do and chose myself and chose where my body was leading me to go. And then that's when my consciousness exploded, right? Like as soon as I honored myself and started coming into alignment with the starship, alignment with the blueprint, I transcended the blueprint. I have all these codes, and then I feel like I activate these codes within other people that I talk to and that I work with. And it's not so much about saying it with words. We're all doing this, by the way, of course. And it's like our energetics, our auric fields are creating the space for this. It's just like you might receive an attunement from a guru, so to speak, right? And the ideas of those times, except now we're all gurus. We're all enlightening ourselves, self-initiated, like you're talking about. And I think the other thing is like, you know, it used to be the Buddha master, like in the cave by himself, kind of doing his own solo thing. But now we're like regular people. Like I'm a mom and I like do regular things, but I can still be a master of my reality and still live in this world. And I think that's like a little bit of an evolution from those older times of what mastery used to look like, is that we're mastering our reality as the human.
It's stages and changes. I mean, just like your child is like, you know, there's 0 to 12 months is a very different stage than, you know, 2 to 5, which is very different than like 7 to, you know, 14. So I think there's some level of our species initiating into a new level of age. Like, I mean, that's obvious in the kind of astrology, the new age and all this kind of stuff, but it's like we're growing up a little and we have the chance to play the game a little more wisely, I would think. This gets into yugas and all sorts of other kind of presuppositions, but it seems like for a long time, fear and scarcity have been leading the parade, and we've been looking at each other as like threats, and I want to get to the top of the pyramid at your cost, and all this kind of stuff, and we're starting to get to a place where maybe like harmony, understanding, all the Age of Aquarius song lyrics, you know, harmony and understanding, all this kind of stuff, we can actually go to that place. It was always probably available, but it was so much less obvious as a choice that's desirable. It was probably more people like poo-pooing hippies or whatever, and you know, at the time. And now it's like, yo, I don't want to be part of the machine. I'm sick of Babylon working. I'm tired. You know, it's like people are fed up, and they're going to start doing what you're doing, which is going off and making collectives. Raphael's doing it in Vienna. I was trying to do it, like that's why I was in Australia and Switzerland and places. Ironically, in Switzerland, I was there for like 10 months, and I was in an intentional Christian hostile youth think tank thing, but I was helping like run schedules and give tours. So I totally understand the intentional living thing. And I was just looking at your chart. You have a North Node in Cancer in the 4th house, so you are supposed to be a mom. So never doubt that. Given your howler monkeys kind of going bananas, did you need to go? I didn't want to hold you longer than you needed to be held or whatever.
No, thanks for asking. No, Eduardo took care of him. He was probably wanting some snacks or something. You know. So that's interesting, the Cancer North Node, because in my 4th house, because that's been a lot of my death process, right? First, I let go of my husband.
You almost died in a birth thing, right?
In a birth, right? And then though, in this last part, that was the other beautiful part about how this was so, what I would say, orchestrated or designed in a fateful way. It's like, it's interesting. You play with the idea of fate, but then, which is looking at charts and things like that. And then you play with the idea of being the creator. But I think you kind of go through the fate first, and then the fate's done. So now you're creating or something. I mean, not that it doesn't always evolve.
Like Miles Davis said, like, learn all the music theory and then forget it, because then you can play. It's like there's a structure, there's fate, sure, and there's like, you know, rules if you want, and then that's when you can bend them. As Morpheus is like, some are meant to be bent, some can be absolutely broken. Like there's a spectrum kind of there. It's not, you know, gravity can be broken, you just have to know how to do it, like propulsion and, you know, stuff like that, bird wings or whatever.
No, exactly, and that's what was happening, I think, as this all was going down, and I was finally able to like accept myself and accept my decisions and my desires and what I wanted to do, and make that decision, and ending it with my husband. We ended up, I mean, it doesn't mean he didn't go through some shock, and thankfully he wasn't quite on the same conscious path that I was at the beginning. He did do ayahuasca right when he came here, which definitely helped him like digest these shifts.
Team Rabbit Hole approved. I haven't done it, but Raphael has.
It was an interesting experience when he did it. You know, he ended up leaving the shaman and coming in and finding me in the middle of the night, and I guided him through the journey. It was like,
that was a party foul, isn't it? Like, stay in the circle.
Yes, that was my experience with ayahuasca. I still haven't done it. So it's so interesting that that's how I kind of experienced it. I knew exactly what to do to guide him through it as if I were the shaman. But yeah, I'm like, oh my God, the shaman doesn't even know he's gone. Like he literally, there's a dude on ayahuasca on the loose. And so who's to say why that happened, except that I was meant to guide him through his process. But anyways, you know, he and
that's pretty meta, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we ended up, we're friends, like we're best friends, like we've always been. We are just not together anymore. It doesn't mean we didn't go through a little bit of a hard patch, like going through the process, and he went through his own sadness and whatever he had to go through. And I went through mine, but there was, I think, a deep trust on both of our levels of understanding this. And like him and Eduardo could be friends. We could all have dinner together. He just now moved back to the US, and he took the two older ones wanted to go with him. So that's where, like, I just went through my process of, with North Node, Cancer, fourth house, all happening. As that ended, as that eclipse came, my two oldest children just moved back to the States, and I'm still here. So it's like, I'm redefining my role as a mother, because I had to go through the guilt and shame of like, what is a mother? And I'm a bad mom because I'm not going to stay with my kids. And like, but trusting surrendering to these processes. And mother is beyond physical mother, and the gene key starts getting into this too, and family alchemy and things like that. We're stepping beyond family just being the one family unit. We really are all family, like bringing the song, right? But we really are all that. And so our whole family together has transcended that. And so definitely we talk about mom and dad, and thankfully they've been like so supportive of the whole bit. His family won't talk to me. I'm definitely the girl on the shit list. You know,
I was gonna say, I'm
course.
surprised your kids wanted to go back, given like America's climate right now, compared to like, I mean, I know the howler monkeys might be scary at night or something, but it's like, geez, like Costa Rica is an adventure. What did they go back to Texas?
Yeah, they went back to Texas. They had already lived so much of the American life. Like my son's he turns 13. My daughter's 9. He wants to play football. She wants to cheer.
Tony Romo.
Like, yeah, they want to go back to that world, and I don't. And I really had to make that decision to decide if I was going to stay here. And my 4-year-old that I had that experience with is here with me. And there wasn't any fighting about it either. Like we've rewritten the way, and I know more and more people are doing this, and this is actually a part of the mutation. And right now we're in the codon ring of union, which is 4 specific codes. It's the gene key 4, 7, 29, and 59. So the 29, we all have it, by the way, all of us do. So I would read that code. If you're contemplating any of the info, jump into the 29 right now. It comes up in 2 weeks. But looking back, the codon ring of union is about bringing in new forms of relationship and new forms of, and shifts in sexuality. Eventually, even Gene Keys talks about the sublimation of sexual energy altogether. But we're not in that phase yet. We're in the burning out of desire phase. Burning out the desire, collective desire phase. Yeah. And I'm doing my job in that part. So that's part of the 30. The 30 talks about that in the acidic frequency, burning out the desire of the collective at some point in the higher frequencies. So, and
I'll say with the North Node in Cancer and 4th house for you, it's like you're going to reestablish, I mean, your karma, if you want to put it this way, on the astrological front is to somewhat like, redefine what being a mom is, as well as kind of what nurturance looks like. So like you're saying, like you might provide nurturance at a level that's outside of just like your address or something, you know, like your nuclear family, like that might be extending. And also obviously with the dynamic you have, it's a little less traditional. That's probably why, you know, your former husband's or your ex-parent-in-laws or whatever they're called, I forget now, mother and father-in-law are like, fuck you, or whatever, because they're still on another trip. But you're here to kind of be the cutting-edge wave of like what the new motherhood looks like.
Exactly. What the new motherhood looks like, what a divorce has to look like. Understanding that, I mean, I think we've really put a lot of stress on the preservation of relationships and making things work and making things happen and celebrating 50-year marriages of old people that have been miserable because they're grumpy, you know, like that's
But the number's so impressive, guys. I mean, that's the point, right? People stay in something for like the wrong reasons. Score. Yeah, high score in the worst way.
It's like high five, right? Like here, you've been together for 50 years. And so like, and so breaking through that stuff and taking a perfectly beautiful relationship. I mean, that's part of the death of my ego I had to go through. I was like, damn, if I let go of this beautiful relationship that I have no complaints or problems with at all, I think like some of my good friends are going to lose a little bit of their faith in humanity. that they could find a beautiful, because that was the partnership that my husband and I had. And how beautiful is it that because it was so solid like that, that even through this shit, like he had to decide how he was going to handle it, right? I don't get to control that for him. And that's what I had to do when making these decisions, was remember my kids chose me as their mom. They chose me for these very moments right here, they chose me to not conform. They chose me to actually be who I am, because I know in the long run, this is exactly what they need to see and understand. And even now it's like, I feel like I connect with my kids on a more psychic level, even though it might not be intentional, like, oh, I just telepathically communicated with my daughter. There's an energy there where like, she doesn't need me in the same way some other children might need parents. And it's because I've never really created those codependent, because that can come in parenting too, creating these codependent relationships, especially around children where they need to need you, you know? And so it's like, I can see how my parenting style, which different than it is now for sure, because I used to think my whole life was about nothing but being a mom. So what a contradiction to be in this world that I'm in now. And then here's something to top it all off. I'm having another baby, which I didn't plan on having any more children. Eduardo and I are having a child. So we went through all of that shift of like, 2 of my oldest children who I love are moving away. And a lot of people are like, how could you even do that? Right? Like, how could you let your kids kind of thing? And yet and they're happy with where they're at. And it doesn't have to be a fight or an argument. And this stuff to be traumatic for them if the parents don't make it traumatic, right? So if they're not fighting and hating each other and putting each other against each other and bringing negative energy to it. And we're teaching them actually sovereignty, love and acceptance, being yourself, choosing
holding on
what's
loosely
right.
to expectations, maybe.
Yeah. And really redefining roles of who we thought we were supposed to be, or what this, if you're this, you need to do it this way, or, you know, clearing all of those old programs around what a good mother is. That was a program that probably hung over my head for the longest and still creeps back around sometimes, is like the perfect mother program. I've never been the snack mom and the volunteer mom and like that stuff. So I would be like, oh, I'm not like Janie, you know, that kind of thing.
If I may add, I think you asked a great question, or made a great statement in terms of considering. Of course, this is a matter of, you know, worldview or a self-view, but of course, I would agree. Just as you had chosen your parents, your children, in that sense, chose you, and you asked the right question in terms of, or said basically that, of course, they need you to be yourself, because of course you are the role model. And the question then being, what would you want for them? And of course, also for them, if they were in a similar situation out of unconditional love, you know, as the perfect idea of mother and father, you would of course want them to be as supremely happy as they could possibly be, no matter how great their status may seem to others or whatever, just as it was in your case. And the other question I would like to raise, or like to point out, what I always also enjoy as a perspective is, what would you want for yourself if you would look as yourself right now as being your own child? I think that's also a great consideration.
Okay, so if I would look at myself as if I were the child, like basically, like, are you kind of saying like me putting myself in my children's shoes in a way?
Not really in your children's. And I'm not actually asking you to reconsider anything of what you said, because it would fit right in line, but just with any decision and thinking and just like putting it into abstract and then seeing yourself. And
You mean
then
like inner
considering
child?
that, yeah, in this way, and considering like you are not Alisha, I'm not Raphael, but actually I'm Raphael's father. And as his father, what would I wish for him? Knowing all I know about him, because I am him, right? And then I think one would arrive at similar conclusions just as what you've did. So I'm basically just confirming it, just, putting up this perspective of, considering yourself to be your own child, and then looking at yourself with that unconditional love of a mother and a father, but looking at your actual subjective experience as being that, and then considering what is the best advice or idea, or what is the wish you would have for them. And of course, it would be just as unconditionally loving as you would wish for your actual children.
Yeah, exactly. Like I would look down and be like, I'm proud, of that. And I think of how my parents even responded to me in this situation when I because we went through this process kind of secretly. We were in another country. We were kind of able to. That was the beautiful part about it. Nobody really had to see all of this. We got to really go through our processes in the middle of the forest, in the jungle, in the river, with a few other conscious people around us who might have been giving us a little guidance or making suggestions or just being like the sounding boards for us through the process. But when I finally could tell my parents, because it was only my own fear and shame that I couldn't tell them right away, the fear of the judgment, my dad actually started crying and he said, you did it. Like, you're the rainbow bridge. And my dad doesn't even talk like this. Like, it's really interesting. It's not like he's in my
Dad,
same
who
group.
are you?
Exactly. And he was crying. He's on this FaceTime with me. And I have an interesting relationship with my parents anyways. I love them so much. I'm so close to them. And also we don't like call each other every week and see how we're doing. It's like, it's almost like that same thing I'm talking about that I have with my dad. It's like this psychic knowing, like, you're here with each other, but you're peers amongst each other, but you know each other, but you are each other. So it's not like I need to check in or see how things are going, but when we do catch up, it might be a 3-hour thing or something. But I remember on that call, he was crying and being like, proud that he was part of bringing through the rainbow bridge, seeing me as a rainbow bridge. And I was like, damn, literally, who are you, Dad? Like, where is this coming from? And I'm so grateful I have they're so neutral in their support. Like I'm definitely a crazy ass kid in most parents' eyes. I know for my ex-husband, his father, that's been his hardest, right? His son is divorced and the story looks bad, so I'm the bad guy in the story because it really matters to parents what their children do, right? And so their reputation depends on who their children are because they're not themselves, right? So we're busting through these silly molds of any of that stuff. Like at a pretty early point, I remember realizing, oh, my children aren't mine. And I'm not here to produce me's, and I'm not here to produce what I think they're supposed to be or what they want. And that's where human design and gene key stuff kind of came in too. I was like, wow, everyone's so different. Every personality is so different. The way we process emotions is so different. I can not only see this information and love and accept myself exactly how I am, but I can also love and accept anybody else exactly how they are, because I understand they're just living out their design with some conditioning and programming. But ultimately, my job as a parent is to not program my kids, to not program them and condition them to believe any certain way of being. And in the long run, societal wise, there's judgments around what I've done as a mom to my kids and what could be damaging them emotionally and all of the things that they might be going through.
Like you could, whatever you're doing, I mean, like you could damage them any more than, standard regiment culture programming.
Right. So I had to break through all of that stuff. Exactly. And I carried those things though as whispers in my ear. I still carry the judgment, or I would be able to observe it and work through it where it doesn't control me or force me to make a decision that's not really who I am. That's where we've got to get to too, that we're not making decisions based on anybody else, not even our kids, not our moms, not our dads, not our kids, not God, like you're making them based on yourself, how you feel in your body, listening, getting in tune with that connection. And, it's a little bit different than what we've been taught, right?
So out of curiosity, how much of the gene keys in human design do you use on your kids? Like, is that a tool that you're like trying, because that was one of the things in the intro of human design, it's like, this could be amazing for your kids. You can actually grow them up in the way they should go, kind of thing, and letting them fly and be free as themselves. Are you into it at that level, or are you not really kind of going down that rabbit hole?
I understand it, and I think the blanket statement is still that I'm just not here to program them. I'm here to love them and accept them as they are. I'm here to understand that they're going to still receive conditioning and programming from the outside world, and they're designed to do that, just like we did. That's how we learn and play and have experiences. Like, I'm a little sad they're not going to be here in Costa Rica, where the school is a total free school. There's no instruction, there's no teaching, there's no facilitator in the class, and yet they learned Spanish. They were fluent in it in like 3 months, right, without being taught anything.
Is that a regular school?
It's a free school. It's called Well, it's a mix of Montessori and Emerson. And so it's really just prepared environments where the kids have their own, they're here to be autonomous, to choose their stuff, to choose what they want to do.
Just let them explore. They'll figure it out.
They learn it all that way. Like, it's all of our shit that we put inside of them that keeps them from ever learning the natural process from a young age. And so
or the societal like demands where they're like, we need people who are programmers, so we're going to tell you how to program. So that, it's like that's the conditioning part of the expectation of the big brother or whatever.
Right. Or we're going to teach them history, and it's going to be programming and lies and hate. And, like, who believes in any of that shit anymore? Like, why did I memorize any of that stuff? What does that even mean?
I pledge allegiance to the flag, right? It's like, what am I saying?
I totally think that's why literally no one in school seemed to be interested in history, almost, because most of it is, very sketchy.
Well, and the kids coming in now, they have a resonance that's way deeper, whether they know it or not, and whether their parents know it or not. Even if you're coming in to program parents, I also think the kids aren't as programmable anymore. And you can kind of see that with with the more of the next gens that have come up, and they've just kind of like, some of them don't go to school, or they just start to travel, or they create their own stuff and they don't need university. And like, so you can see how that's been happening, and even more as the kids come in, because the frequency on the planet's higher, right? So they automatically come in with a snapshot of wherever the Earth frequency is at that time, or higher even, you could say, but they're not programmed and conditioned. So my biggest role is not to program and then condition them with any of my programs and conditions.
Oh, I didn't mean like you were indoctrinating them with human design. I was just wondering if you use it as a tool of observation to be like, she's a 4-1 line, whatever. Like, I have
played with that. And here's the other interesting, well, first of all, my youngest son is a projector. So he's a little more of the rare one. Most of us are generators and manifesting generators. And so he's a projector, and what I've learned about projectors is they're designed to wait for the invitation, and also they need recognition, which I needed to know that because I'm not much of a recognizer. Like, I don't need recognition myself, and I actually try not to create children that need recognition from anyone or need an approval or someone to be like, oh, you're doing a great job, right?
But in spite of your proclivities, he has a design or whatever.
But he has a design. So, now I understand, like, something, especially if I want him to do it again, like cleaning up his stuff or putting his plate away or whatever, whatever. I'll be like,
you're the best dishwasher ever.
Yeah, and he'll be like, thanks, Mom. And you can see how he really appreciates that. Whereas my other kids would be like, whatever, like they don't need that stuff, but he's designed that way. So I've learned those types of things, and I apply them. I've understood how the emotional wave works, which is really interesting. And that's based on the right center of the solar plexus, whether it's defined or undefined. And I think all of ours are undefined. So we're a little bit different. We're going normally off of our sacral energy, the gut, yes or no. Most of the stuff we feel isn't even our own stuff, but we're with someone with a defined solar plexus, which was my husband and my oldest son. I could now see like they have an emotional wave. So when I learned the mechanics of what that looked like, I could see that they would go through a high intense period, and that if I could just keep my neutral state and I didn't really react to that, I understood that this would calm down and it would come to another place. And so I didn't go and play in the intensity, and therefore I didn't get intense either. And so you really just allow them to have their emotional wave, and you watch it, and you kind of just like look at your watch. Like, I don't wear a watch.
This too shall pass.
But, and it's like, oh, interesting. He's going, with my husband going through the breakup process and knowing like, 1 minute he'd be totally fine, and the next minute he'd have some knee-jerk reaction about something. And I would be like, okay, this is his emotional wave. And so I'd wait a day. I wouldn't take it personal. I wouldn't think anything of it. And I would kind of let that roll through. And then he's like a different person, right? And now I can work with him, and now I can deal with him. And now that other reaction probably doesn't even exist anymore. So I already have my own control over my emotions and my understanding, but now I could understand that in others, and it was really helpful. But the other pattern I noticed that's real interesting is my oldest son Lawson has the same defined and undefined centers as my husband, and I could literally see how he was my husband. They're a reflection of each other on purpose, by design. Again, this is just about birthday. It's not really, but because it's his father, he's like his father, right? So we're just looking at mechanics of design. My daughter's like me. So I could see how, and I've heard this concept before, that you actually have children to reflect your own inner child. Like that's really the purpose of having them. It's not so much about, okay, well, you get married and you have children. It's like you have them so that you have this reflection outside of you. Right. And so right in front of your face all the time. Right. So that's the interesting thing that I've noticed. And I'm not saying not everyone's is going to be like this, but in our particular case, my daughter has the same centers open. It looks like, Raphael, you and I have the same exact centers, defined and undefined. Different codes and things, of course. There's so many variations of this, but I did notice that about you and I. We have the open head and ajna. It's a good design. I would say it's, every time I look at mine, I'm like, God, I picked a fun ass design. Like, I love it. It's so fun. And that's what we all need to get to. And if we're playing our design, we'll get there because it will feel good. It will feel better than anything else when we actually start playing in our design. And yet, I don't think you have to know this stuff to get there, right? You can really get to that point of like just surrendering and really letting this thing play through you, which is kind of this is the image I see all the time now. It's like, can we jump off the cliff? Can we jump and realize the fear that's keeping us from jumping? Like we think we're going to die, or we think we're going to get hurt or something like that. And we let go of the control and we really just fall into this like nature that's flowing through us, that's leading us. And that's where I've kind of gotten, it's like, I don't question anything. I don't plan anything. I don't have expectations. The creator that I am actually doesn't have an agenda. It is only that I am wide open to the flow. And this is Tao energy, right? This is what you were bringing up earlier. It really is that. And so far it hasn't done me wrong. Like I wouldn't have logically written my story like this if I had written a 5-year plan. I wouldn't have ever imagined myself divorced. I wouldn't have ever imagined myself living in another country. I wouldn't have imagined myself pregnant again, like any of that stuff. And yet I maintain these high levels of love in my body and feeling an orgasmic energy in my body pretty much all day, every day, without even having to think about it, because I'm living in my design. And that's where I think we can start to look at this stuff and rework the way that we understand ourselves and our design. I mean, that's how I usually start out any session if I'm sharing human design or gene keys with someone, is I tell them, I just want you to imagine that before you came into this world, you typed up these codes and this design, and you wanted to be this, and you wanted to experience that, and your parents and your traumas. And so there's no regrets here. And so now you start to see how it's all by design and it's all perfect. And so now here we are, where we can love and accept all of that, forgive it, whatever needs to heal, whatever needs to be healed, so that we can move forward with the embodiment of the higher self. If we can just get, and it goes through opening the heart, of course. It's the frequency of love. It's opening the heart. But the only way we can embody these higher frequencies in the body, which we are designed to do, is we've got to let go of the attachments of the old stories of who we thought we were. This is the true death and the rebirth. And maybe not everyone's coded for that either, but you're talking to a Scorpio. So this is just my personal death. And I will tell you something so interesting. When my husband set up our divorce, he had to fly into the US to do it. We did it totally without any lawyers. We paid the most simple fee possible. And it ended up on the Saturn-Pluto conjunction exactly in January, whenever that was. I think there was an eclipse too. Yeah, it was so interesting. That's when I started realizing, I can't deny this stuff. Because, some people will still be like, oh, astrology is a hoax or all of this stuff. And I'm like, and I take it loosely, though. I just play with this stuff. I don't take anything too serious. Nothing's the end all be all. That's the only way we can evolve, right? If we don't get too attached to any system, too attached to any process, so that we can still continue to evolve. So who knows? I mean, in a year, maybe I won't even think about the gene keys. Maybe they won't even be relevant.
Now it's applicable, and that's kind
of
very
relevant.
Point where it's like being too rigid. Like if the tree is like, I'm a seed, I'm never going to be anything else. Like it won't become a sapling. If it's a sapling, I'm like, I won't be a bigger, middle tree. It won't become a fucking redwood or whatever. So it's like there's appropriateness for where you are at all times. One thing you were kind of saying that hit me, I'm totally spacing on it now, derp. But so we keep on talking about the I Ching and how it ties to the codon rings. This Terrence McKenna, I'll have to send you some info and links and stuff. I don't know if you know who he was, but he was kind of an American philosopher, all about mushrooms and DMT and stuff.
I love him. He was born on November 16th, so he was born 2 days before me. I watched that Time Wave Zero video. Have you seen that one?
Yes, yes, I was going to mention it. That's what I was like.
God.
There's a 30-minute interview where he starts breaking down the nature of time as reflected in the I Ching. That's where his Time Wave Zero, his software that he designed on novelty. That's why December 21st, 2012, in the McKenna world was the end. The beginning of a new paradigm, or the end of novelty becoming so crazy that it's like we can't chart this as like a not just XY, it's like Z now or whatever. And obviously the Mayan calendar ended then too. My mom's birthday is the 21st of December. Okay, so you know who McKenna is. He's a Scorpio sun and Virgo moon, so he kind of talks in this staid emotional way. He's one of my favorites. Actually, we're having Rupert Sheldrake on the podcast. We have to schedule that, but he used to be kind of like one of his ninjas and like hang out with him and Ralph Abrahamson, who's a chaos mathematician. I'll send you something called the Trilogues, which they did, McKenna, Sheldrake, and Abrahamson, which is kind of like podcasting before podcasting. It was like in the 80s. They'd just be like, what is time? And they talk about Gregorian calendars and just kind of muse, like long form. Fascinating shit. There's like 30 lectures. But anyway, yeah, it seems like there's this woof and weave to the fractal it has to design. It's not chaos, but holding on loosely to that, we can feel it's like painting by numbers in a sense. It's like the numbers are there and the lines are there, but then you can make it kind of whatever colors you want. The map isn't the territory in the sense that being dogmatic and being like, well, it says there's a waterfall here and it should be XYZ. It's like it gives us kind of an idea, not exactly of what to expect. The thing that came to mind now, I'm remembering earlier, you're like, oh, I would never have plotted this life, and it's like, and ironically it's like that you plotted it, so it's like I don't have to tell you that, but it's almost like a screenplay isn't exactly like the final product. So like whatever the screenplay for the Matrix was, or Cloud Atlas, or any Tron or whatever movie, it doesn't flow the same way. It has to fill in, and then it impresses everybody in part of it. Even the director's vision is like probably surpassed, so we're in a mode of creating stories that have scripts, but they can be filled in various ways with creativity and other people playing their scripts, and that turns into like this whole pageantry of collaboration, which is what life fucking is.
Yeah, it's isn't it fun when you get there, when this is just, you're here to have fun, you're here to experience, you're here to play, you're here to watch this thing unfold, and it's like you're the creator and the watcher, and there are no regrets here. There's nothing by chance here. And that's that true surrender, the jumping off the cliff, when we can start to watch it like that.
You can fly, you can fly, you can fly. We have pixie dust. It's our imagination. And we just have to trust in it, I think, in our heart, I guess, combined imagination and heart. Is there anything that we haven't really touched on that you felt pressing? Because I think I mentioned to Candace, I want to have like a Gene Key human design kind of episode one day where we just have a few people who are way into it and just like talk about it like really in depth. We've talked about it, kind of you and stuff, and tapped into it, and I appreciate the fact that you're kind of like a professional amateur or something like that. Like myself, I didn't go to astrology school, but I still do it. So is there anything like that we aren't really tapping on that is kind of resonating in your mind or heart, or do you feel kind of finished on that front?
Well, I think the main thing to bring through on any of this stuff is to understand that we're not fixed. What I've understood more than anything about this information is that understanding and playing with the idea that there is a mutation, and Gene Key 55 and 22 are kind of the key.
That's what my twin flame and I are. I have 22, she has 55.
Oh, so exactly.
Amongst other things. So
the 22 is and it's bringing in that feminine code, the 22. And if you've read it, it's talking about the different planes of existence, and
it's like Earth to the stars is the 22, and 55 is like from heavens down to Earth. It's that interlocking triangles of the Star of David kind of thing.
And I kind of tell people if they can forego studying their own intrigue of their own self, and they jump into these codes, it can really, but we're all here at different levels to understand things differently too, right? Like someone's going to come in and learn the Gene Keys by studying one code a month. Like Richard Rudd, the creator of Gene Keys, would be like, don't overdo this stuff. You need to give yourself time and contemplate a code for a month and go one at a time. And I've never even followed any of the formal systems for this stuff. You just kind of play with this. But the 22 and the 55, that 22 is kind of bringing in the feminine, the 55 is bringing in, I would also say, the 49 too. So, they're all pertinent, they're all important, they're all magical and fun. And they're all contradictory too. It's like you get into those acidic states and there's contradiction there in a way, or there's a paradox there when you kind of get to the acidics, and it's like there are no rules. Like all of the things about gurus and masters not being able to do this or doing that, or, you know, it's like there really are no rules here. There are no morals here about what's right and wrong. And that's the interesting part that you kind of come to when you get to some of these acidic states. And I would say number one, these acidic states are here, and people are able to embody them. I think when I first started getting in the Gene Keys, I was around a lot of people that talked about it as if it was really far away and something impossible, like the acidic states were Jesus, you know. And I'm like, we're here to embody this stuff. We are this stuff. We wrote this code for ourselves to turn ourselves back into this, to remember this. But, you know, in the 55, it's called the Dragonfly's Dream.
I should clarify, I'm the 55, she's the 22. She'll kill me if I don't say that. She'll be like, you idiot, you misrepresented us, or whatever.
No, but
so anyway, yeah, the dragonfly, right, where it comes out of the water and it takes a minute, but then it can kind of morph into a new domain altogether.
Well, it's showing the mutation. It's showing the mutation that, you know, it's born into the water, and it thinks this is all that there is, and one day, it's not even like a scientific explanation exactly. It's not like every day on this month or whatever. One day they spontaneously step out of the water and these wings fly out of their back and they fly for the rest of their life.
No longer are they water bound, they're airbound. It's like an element shift.
Isn't it? And so that's what it's here to show us. If we just consider that, we can understand that we are here in this physical body mutating. And so we're being shown the process of mutation through the insects, through, you know, metamorphosis with the butterfly. And so that's what that 55, I don't know that he's explaining it exactly like that, but I think so. It's like, that's the idea. If you can grasp that concept and understand that we're not fixed and we're not limited, and that we are coded for this, or we wouldn't even be, anybody listening to this is, or they wouldn't be hearing this information. It's because it's time for that activation to come on. And I find that when people come into this stuff, like, it's not very long after that shit starts to shake up, whether it's relationship, job, individual, you know, it just kind of has to. Like, you're here to jump into some higher planes of existence, or having some shifts or whatever. That's why the information would come, to prepare you for what I would call these quantum leaps, where you go from one person to a completely new person without even really putting time onto it.
Well, it's
Just
like
to
when
confirm what you said, I just checked the date on when I actually got this paper for the first time. In my case, it was 2014 already. And just looking at the date, I can very much confirm what you're saying. So it's right on.
Right. I started waking up right around the end. I went through a huge breakup at the end of 2013, 2014. It's probably right around when I met Raphael. So here we are, just kicking into the next gear. And like she's saying, it's like when he always has the splinter in his mind. So I think some people are more aware, like they know something's different, and then they take that red pill. But he is very disoriented when he takes it. You know, they're like, breathe through this, and then he turns all metallic and like fractal screams or whatever, and then he wakes up in the fucking incubator or whatever. Doesn't make it easy. So you're gonna have some. I mean, the butterfly comes from an emulsification process of the caterpillar. It liquefies, right, in a chrysalis. It like dies, basically. So very scorpionic stuffs. So people, you know, be prepared for the changes, but the changes bring about a new level of being that who knows the first person perspective of a caterpillar or the dragonfly, but I don't think they know that they have to initiate a process, but they don't probably understand the results of the process. They're not like, I gotta fly one day, damn it. They're probably just like, what's going on? Oh my gosh. And, you know, then all of a sudden they're a new thing. So we are being born into this new form. It's been written in the stars. It's been written in our genes. It's time. We're here, and we're part of the ground crew to initiate this shit. So I really do appreciate you coming on today. I don't want to take too much of your time. You are a mom, so there's like life to deal with and stuff. But any kind of parting thought? And like, do you have a website? We'll be sure to put it in the links.
Yeah, the Gene Keys talks about this, the Trivian human. So he talks about the root races that have come through, the Lemurian and the Atlantean. And
our last episode was literally Atlantis and Lemuria. So really, we were just talking about that.
See, and I'd never heard of root races and stuff, but that's the first stuff I was kind of coming into. not so much diving into my codes as much as the structure of where this information was coming from. And it was talking about these root races. So the 49 and the 55 are also connected together. It's talking about the individual awakening and then the collective awakening. So the 49 and 55 are both really nice to read, and the 22. But oh, what was I going to tell you about that? What was the point of me telling you that? Damn, I kind of lost it. I don't know.
Don't feel bad.
No,
Rabbit holes can collapse on us sometimes.
I know, it just went away. But so 49, 55, check them out. But no, I don't have a website. I've just kind of been casually starting to really share this stuff with people. I do sessions for people that want to know stuff about it. But I'm a Facebook Messenger, Facebook. I kind of just keep it simple. It's funny to think I used to work for a tech for 8 years, and now I'm like basic internet user. But I don't have a website. I do a podcast with my ex-husband called You've Been Programmed. Vibrate into, yeah, so you can post that. It's You've Been Programmed, Vibrate into a New Reality. And it's really kind of, it's talking to the person just awakening, kind of coming through the like letting go of what they thought mattered, and the money and the life and the jobs and the reputations and the people, and just the whole awakening process. We've kind of step by step talked through our life, our breakup, and how we're managing now and all of that.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah, we could probably do a little more on it. I mean, we're just really coming out of the closet. We've part a year now. I mean, the divorce was final January, but I've been with Eduardo just a year. So I haven't even talked about being pregnant yet, and I'm halfway through. I'm actually due right around the solstice, on Christmas Day, actually. So it's interesting. The Gene Keys even talks about when two auras come together. The 59 talks about this, when two energy fields come together and merge into one, which I would say that's what's happened with he and I, that it makes for the new awareness to come into form in the form of a child. Baby. So yeah, well, and right, because what am I going to program them to believe, right? I'm just the portal for this badass light that's about to come through, is really how I see it. It's funny, the evolution of even how I've seen childbearing. My first two kids, it was like, oh yeah, we're having kids and babies are cute. And then by the third one, I was like, man, this is a spiritual experience. And then,
but you're like,
I still
I have
wasn't
the
deep
prophet
into it.
in my belly.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Christ consciousness, December 25th, even though December 25th is just a fake affiliation with those dates anyways, but still there's some significance to it. So yeah, I mean, that's what I'm here to bring to people is, and the mutation doesn't have to be scary. It's as scary as hard as we hold on to the old world. We got to let go of it, and we have to trust, and we have to take that leap, and we have to remember we're not going to die. We're going to fly. We really are the immortals. We really are here to bring the new consciousness. The mutation doesn't necessarily feel like anything. You might not even notice physical things necessarily, but it's happening in the body. It's happening through our understanding and our consciousness and our awareness and the way we process emotions, read the field, read other people, tune into the psychic awareness that we have that's kind of been, batted down sometimes, depending on how we've grown up or what the clutter has been inside the body that's kind of clouding all of that. So I'm just excited as we all awaken to this collective field, and I'm feeling it more and more, and I'm feeling the power and the intensity of that. And it is a magnification that's happening, a multiplication that's happening where, two come together and it's like 1,000. And so all three of us come together, and whoever's listening, and the impact that actually is making energetically in this plane of existence that we believe to exist around the planet, around the world, if we want to look in space and time. When we're coming together and remembering stuff together, there's so much DNA that still hasn't been activated that's going to bring us the deep certainty of who we really are. And that's what's coming.
But there's more. It's like, it ain't over yet. We're just kicking into the next grade level.
It never ends. We've just been preparing for this, and we had to go through kind of the little stuff first, and now it's time to really embody, God, I never heard of a Palladian until I got here, and a book fell off a shelf, and this girl handed it to me, and I was like, what's a Palladian? And then I read this book, And it was, and I realized I'm born in the Palladian lineup. I'm born directly Palladian, November 18th, which is also Terrence McKenna is born in the Palladian lineup. So this is some starseed astrology information. You might already know it, but the 25th, 6th, and 7th degree in Scorpio and Taurus are connected to the Palladians. And so, which is mid-May and mid-November is when we're directly stacked with the Palladian energy. So, but yeah, I'd never even heard of that till I got here. And then I read this Bringers of the Dawn book. And that's actually how I started hearing about DNA and frequency first. And then the gene keys came in, and it was about genes and DNA and frequency. And I was like, wow, there's something to this.
Hit. Like, because the Bringers of the Dawn was a book that fell off a shelf, ironically, randomly from my fiance way back in the day, and like fell into her bag or something. Like, same kind of situation where it's just like, okay, she's not a Scorpio, but she's Virgo. But the point is, yeah, dude, it's kind of like interstellar. Like, there's things and forces of ourselves in other ways, like trying to tap us into higher levels of initiation, and just keep your mind and eye open, and you'll see these patterns. And what a magical mystery tour we're on, huh?
That's so cool that happened to her, because this girl just said, hey, this book fell off the shelf and your face popped in and I'm supposed to give you this book. And I read it and I was like, how was this shit written 26 years ago? My mind is being blown. And I'm reading it. I'd never heard anything like that. And this was just not even 2 years ago. I had not even heard of a starseed. And
I'm glad that chick was open to the synchronicity like that.
Oh, she was deep. She was the first person when I met here. I was like, wow, I'm finally around people, because I'd been living in this my own inner world for a really long time. And I hadn't reflected out yet because I hadn't learned to be myself. I was really afraid to express my awakening, so I was still only attracting people that would totally weird because I couldn't honor my own awakening. It was like when I really started being who I was starting to realize and see that I'd been people to me that were seeing like she brought me that book. And I was like, how was that written 26 years ago? And then, I started to see, because there is no linear time here, it's as if we come into these timelines and we put this stuff here. We come from the future and we put it back, and we kind of can rewrite stuff or reroute things. Or so literally, Bringers of the Dawn fell out of the sky. Gene keys fell out of the sky. Human design. These were the tools that kind of came in as my tool belt. To connect me. And yet I don't have Palladian connections like where I channel. I feel directly connected to the source consciousnesses. The Palladians are deeply connected with this country, this land, this magical mermaid that's out in the ocean that nobody knows how it got there, that I always go visit around the eclipses and the full moons, and connected to Venus and magical stuff. Anyways, I know I could go on forever, and we've been on here a while, but
you're cool. We'll get you back on here. So basically, parting thoughts are like, follow the magic, find the mermaids at eclipse seasons, all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, surrender, let go. Stop. Don't let fear fuck with you so hard. Like, we really got to identify fear is what's keeping us from really letting go. Fear is dissolving the last of our programs, that are keeping us in this limited state most of the time. Like, we've been taught to trust the fear, but the fear is always a lie. And we hear that and we know that. Like, it's the cliche, fear is a lie, false evidence appearing real. But seriously, we're here to learn how to manage the chemicals in the body, the connection of the emotions in the body, and then just start listening and following these desires. And then we start creating our reality through the electromagnetic frequencies of our heart. We didn't even really get into that kind of talk, but it's like, now you are time traveling. To me, time traveling is when you start understanding frequency and you play with this stuff, and it brings you into different worlds. And that's what this multidimensional living actually looks like. And in an instant, in no time, no linear time, this is what I am feeling like looks like a quantum way of living, or quantum realities, or timeline jumping, or things like that, is that we're navigating it through frequency. And it never ends. We just got to let go of any of the old stories and trust it when our life prompts us with that stuff. Shift out of any kind of victim mode of like, damn, why is this happening to me? Where'd this come from? And like really letting go and blaming anybody else. Like, to me, that's the simple stuff, but it's like, you can't get quantum play if you still think there's bad guys, if you still think that there's somebody that's, making your life suck, And so, shifting out of that stuff, letting go of it so we can really start to play in the magic, because every day is magic.
Hell yeah. I know that Raphael digs that, and I'm trying my hardest to remember all this because we are remembering. So I guess in parting, I'd just say y'all find the others. Like Candace came on here, she turned me on to Alisha. Just find the others, and you'll find the patch networks that you need to get hooked into, and you will find your Nebuchadnezzar crew, and you will, hack the matrix is kind of what we're doing. So, Raphael, any thoughts?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Alisha. Thank you, everyone, for listening. The free navigation of time and space is a natural ability of fourth density consciousness. And all else I can say is be the unicorn, face the dragon, and then meet the fairies, aliens, and whatever else you desire. Thanks again. Enjoy yourselves.
Radio Okitalk, Radio Okitalk, von Mensch zu Mensch.